Call the City Council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining.
Here.
Germaini.
Here.
Lamore.
Present.
Felder.
Here.
Whitman.
Here.
Stilgrave.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Present. So we have our work session this evening. There's a couple items on the agenda, and I'll look to Mr. Robinson.
Yes, Your Honor, and council members, we'd like to start this out with the Mason Run Planned Unit Development Update overview. We have some movement going on, and I think it's a proper time. Mr. Van Acker, or Vanasacker, one of my friends is last name, so it's really hard to, I go back and forth. And Mr. Cochran been working very hard on this, and I think you'll be happy with what you hear.
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, Matt Vanasacker, Deputy Director of Economic and Community Development and Neighborhood Services Coordinator for the City of Monroe. Here tonight to talk about a really exciting project that's come before us. We've been working on it since about March, and that is an update to the Mason Run Neighborhood Planned Unit Development Agreement and Pattern Book. As I said, have been working on this since March when we received an application from Infinity Homes, a notable home builder in Southeast Michigan, to amend the existing PUD agreement and pattern book for the Mason Run neighborhood. The request came as Infinity Homes would like to develop single-family homes on 23 of the existing infill lots in the Mason Run neighborhood. And then additionally, they would like to divide up a few of the larger unsplit parcels that are remaining for development into 34 additional lots for single-family homes. So I think it's safe to say, and I don't have the facts and figures in front of me, but this would be one of the larger housing developments that have happened in the last 15 years for the city. So needless to say, this is a massive undertaking, massive project. There's a lot of different actions that have to go into it. So we're just kind of starting this process now. The existing PUD agreement was proposed and passed in February of 2000 by then developer Crosswinds Development and Creative Land Design, and extends all the way from Elm Street through the existing Mason Run neighborhood, all the way through the high property to the Frenchtown Township line. So when that initial agreement was proposed, they were proposing to develop that entire slate of land. And that's typically when you see a PUD agreement come about, is when a large tract of land is proposed to be developed by a single developer. At the time of the initial development, they were planning to develop, as I said, the entirety of that site. However, economic conditions in 2007, 2008 forced them into bankruptcy, unfortunately, and they were forced to vacate the remaining development as a result of that. Since that time, a number of developers have approached the city inquiring on the development of existing undeveloped lots, infill lots. People have come and asked, on this single lot, can we amend the PUD agreement to do something different? And upon conversations with them on how much of an effort this would be to transfer, they've tended to foregone their interest in the sites. Primarily because, in the original agreement, it allows for 3 different types of houses to be developed. There's very strict standards on the colors utilized, the site layouts, et cetera, and a number of other factors that lead into this decision. When Infinity Homes approached in March, they expressed their willingness to work with the city on developing a new set of standards for the area north of Elliott Street, and they would like to keep the remaining infill lots south of Elliott Street in the existing design standards to complement the rest of the existing neighborhood. So needless to say, when they were interested in maintaining the existing charm and the character that is the Mason Run neighborhood as we know it today, we were very excited to work with them, and they were very eager to work with us on developing an amended agreement. So to get into a little bit of the 2 different sides to this process, it requires a planned unit development amendment along with a pattern book amendment. So 2 different kind of phases in this process. And as changes to the original PUD and pattern book were proposed, we enlisted the service of our planning consultants at MKSK to assist in the development of a new PUD agreement and pattern book, which will be known as the Mason Run 2 pattern book. As part of this assistance, MKSK reached out to the original pattern book crafters from Urban Design Associates in Pennsylvania and worked with them throughout the process of coming to an update on this pattern book. So we had the original crafters of the pattern book working with our existing planning consultants to make sure that no stone was unturned in this process. The Mason Run 2 pattern book addresses the principles of new urbanism that were instrumental in the initial pattern book and PUD development. These principles include connectivity, walkability, mixed use and diversity, mixed housing, quality architecture and urban design, transportation, sustainability, quality of life, density, and neighborhood structure. So those were all things that we wanted to make sure were paramount in any development that would happen in the future throughout that area. And these areas are thoroughly addressed in 4 key sections in the new pattern book: architectural standards, site standards, housing types, and landscaping. Those are the 4 things that there were 3 items that were called out in the initial pattern book. They added the 4th in this one to make sure that it was keeping that existing character. After a number of phone calls and virtual meetings, Infinity Homes has worked with our team and planning consultants to revise elevations and the color palette of 6 different housing types that they're proposing to build on the additional lots north of Elliott. So on the, or I should say, to this point, all revisions have come to the satisfaction of the planning division. We're still working with them to finalize some of those leading up to the planning commission meeting on Monday night. And as I said, kind of the next steps in this process, it goes before planning commission Monday, September 11th, where public comment will be heard and a vote recommending approval or denial to the city council will be made before coming to this body if you vote to accept the public hearing tonight for October 2nd, it would come to you on October 2nd. So that's the plan as of right now. And I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions as time permits here in this session, or, of course, on October 2nd when this comes back before this body. So
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. You said the architectural site standards, housing standards. What was the last one?
Architectural standards, site standards, housing types, and landscaping.
Thank you.
So those will be the 4 key factors in this agreement. I did pull up on the screen for you, and I know it's a bit hard to see. I should have used a different color other than the yellow points. But the purple dots would be the area that would signify the new development north of Elliott Street. And then the existing yellow placeholders are the existing lots that are undeveloped, and we would consider those as infill lots within the existing development.
Okay, thank you. Questions or for Matt from council? Kelly?
Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
You said there were 6 different proposed types
Yep.
of housing. So there'll be 6, or will there be certain amounts selected from the 6?
So 6, there will be 6 on like the area where you see the purple dots. And it will be the remaining 3 that were in the initial development agreement in the yellow placeholders there. So
How many? Do you know how many different styles there are there currently?
in the current guide, 3,
Okay.
to my knowledge, yes. And I think the one thing to consider too in this as well is that we're following the existing PUD, using it as the guide for this development. So if you're familiar with that pattern book, it actually calls for no more than 1 of each type within a series of 3 homes. So as those lots start to be spoken for and as the development begins, that will limit the number of elevation options for the remaining lots.
Thank you, Your Honor. Matt, I see we're going to need to do some infrastructure there as well, I'm assuming. The completion of Lorraine Street, run through of Mason Run and Baptiste. And it looks like you're going to have a new street in there as well, possibly. Am I correct in saying that?
I believe it would be the extension of Lorraine, and all of this is really dependent on when the development begins, when it commences, and then how it progresses through. I think the one thing we wanted to make sure was that we weren't biting off too large of pieces in this. For instance, if Infinity Homes, they are they're done after what they're proposing, and they don't choose to go further north, or if they propose any other type of agreement, we want to make sure that any other developer that would come in would have to go through the same process to ensure that the integrity of the neighborhood's maintained.
Another question for you. Do we have a pricing structure on the homes or the housing that they propose on the yellow and on the purple?
Yeah, so Infinity Homes, they do have some numbers proposed. We can have those for you for the October 2nd meeting. I unfortunately don't have those with me tonight.
Michelle?
Do we have water and electric already hooked up to that street, or is that something we have to add in there also?
I believe it is hooked up to that street. I don't know about sewer infrastructure. That's the only question. But I think electricity and I think water may be running to that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Deb?
Is this where there's like a pond or something over there?
So over time, that has developed. So the developer is aware of that, and so that would be a part of this process. Would be making sure that that was built to a standard where that would not be underwater, obviously, anymore. Yeah, right. the little the unofficial marshland. Yeah.
Kelly?
So I wasn't around when Mason Run was built. So how does this work as far as what is our responsibility as a city and what is their responsibility? Like I know at the Lazy Boy we were responsible for infrastructure and things like that. What do we have to do as a city?
I think portions of that will come up as they continue this development. I don't believe there's anything set as of right now. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah.
This is really Matt's show, so I didn't want to jump in too much. But regarding the extension of Lorraine and Baptiste and Mason Run Boulevard, if that's necessary, we still have to work out the responsibility of whose costs those are. The developer is under contract on some of these properties, and they have a due diligence period. And part of that due diligence period is making sure that the zoning is in place before they actually execute the agreement to purchase the property. So this is the first step of many that we're going to go down in completing this development. And I'll say I really want to give Matt a lot of credit for his hard work. The developer, has met us halfway at every single consideration that we've brought forward here. I think down to the minute today, I think it was 5 o'clock today, we got the draft pattern book back. And so we're going to be able to show you that. It's actually going to go out with the Planning Commission agenda Wednesday afternoon or Thursday. We're finalizing that with the developer later this week. And so at that point, we'll make sure that you also get a copy of it so you can see what are the style of the homes. And then one more thing to add to Matt's presentation, the high property that Matt referred to, which is all the vacant farmland that the city owns that we lease out for farming north of Lorraine. That's also part of the Mason Run PUD. And while this developer is not coming to us right now asking to purchase that or to continue the development north, we have broached that subject. If this goes well, would you be interested in doing more? And they are. And so we've removed that right now because we don't know what format housing we're going to put up there. I think the city has 125 acres or so of the high property. And as Matt's working through the residential strategy that council approved the agreement on at the last meeting, we're going to look at, is that a place for different types of housing in addition to the single family housing like townhouses and independent senior living, and how can that land be utilized to meet some of our residential gaps? So part of this was increasing the flexibility that's allowed within the Mason Run neighborhood to meet today's market demands, but also loosening some of the restrictions that we have on the vacant property to look at future residential opportunities there that aren't so tight and restrictive as the original Mason Run pattern book. So.
Awesome.
Brian?
More questions. Speaking of that large pond that's over there, I know that we've had some issues with, over in the Lazy Boy property with Eagle, trying to get that straightened out. Is that going to be an issue here as well?
I think it's too early to say. I think there's differences in terms of what Eagle is after. Most often when there is water or there is a cattail on a property, most of the time they're there. I think it'll be a process working with them. But I don't think it's anything that the developer hasn't gone through before on some other sites that they've worked on.
I know we've been trying to help out some people become homeowners in the past, and I think it's a good idea. Is it part of our strategy to possibly utilize the property as a down payment for some of these people?
Well, working with the developer, they'll take the control, right, of the Mason Run 2 LLC land as it is currently. It's possibly a discussion on some of the city-owned parcels, but I think to a certain extent the developer working on that agreement with them, and then it'd be their right to sell the land if it's executed. So possibly
You're saying where I'm going with that, though. I mean, it's just another
as another tool. Yep.
another tool in the tool chest that's going to allow us to basically get a homeowner in that property without having too much of a
Right.
burden.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I don't see anything further. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the Planning Commission reviews and responds, and then coming back to hopefully the council. I look forward to seeing the pattern book and the revisions too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I'll stay up here because I think the next one's me as well.
That's fine.
That I know that they, just previous to me starting my position here, they had brought to you a draft public arts ordinance to get your feelings on, to get your opinions on, so that they could go back and start having, a draft ready for you for ordinance, et cetera. And they've worked real hard. I know that they've met with a couple of you and gotten your feedback, et cetera. And they've worked hard. We've had internal meetings on this, and I think some things were clarified, and I think that they've worked very hard at putting this together in a realistic and easy to understand for our residents. And I think the purpose of them bringing it to today is kind of a last look over for you to see if there's anything in there that you feel that would make it better or needs to be changed before they bring it in front of you in the form of proposing an ordinance. Matt?
Absolutely. No, yeah, and definitely to City Manager Robinson's comments, I believe the last time or first time that you were exposed to this was on June 20th, your work session on that night. And it was then the wish of council that we take this back, work on it, get thoughts, get feedback, and come up with some edits based on those. And really, there were a couple overarching things that came out of this process. First, there was a wish to go one of two directions. List all different kinds of public art and do an all-encompassing public art policy, or call out specific areas of public art and create a policy around those. And then second, there was a desire to include additional definitions that called out specific types and account for those in this as well. So took some of that feedback, and before you is a policy that takes the second of those, of the two proposed directions, which we are labeling as installed public art. I should say, we settled on this direction when we did a further evaluation. We were asked to go back and look at really what the objectives of this policy were. And I went through those at length during the June 20th meeting, so I won't go back through that. They're there before you. But really got to the crux of some of the issues, that we're seeing, or some of the opportunities that we have as a city as well. So to highlight a few of the changes, we've provided a definition for installed public art, calling out 3 specific types of installed public art: standalone, integrated, and applied. And you can see the definitions there in the policy for you. We've called out more specific definitions for murals, sculptures, geoglyphs, and mosaics in this policy. And we have reworked the application requirements and review criteria to call for additional planning regarding the funding of installed works of public art, and also the maintenance, ongoing maintenance and disassociation of art at the end of its useful life. So I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to either meet with us in person, give us a call, send some comments along. But I think tonight's goal is to leave this with you, get any of your additional thoughts just on first glance, but then to bring it back before a council meeting for approval here shortly in the future. I think that's it.
That's it. Well, I guess I'll take questions for now, and I may have a couple. Kelly?
So when you talk about approval, and you says that, so who's the people who approves the application, and does the approval have anything to do with the actual art, or does it just have to do with them meeting all of the application rules?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of two parts to that. So the Planning Commission ultimately will receive those applications. They'll come into the Economic and Community Development Department, as is standard procedure for a number of different processes that we utilize. And I think really getting down to to your second question, looking at at some of the different items that may come up, not necessarily looking at the content of the art, aside from, something that's within the city's naming rights policy, some of those other items, that's really what we're getting down to. And I think really, when it comes down to it, we had thrown this back and forth, and when you're dealing with some, either murals that could be, a certain material that's just affixed to a wall, or if it's painted directly on a wall, it's a little bit different. If it's something that's affixed to the wall, it could fall off. It creates a safety concern. If there's a sculpture that's in the in the public right of way, someone walked and it had a sharp edge or something and poked themselves on it, is the city liable in that case? So different considerations like that we thought geared a little bit closer to the site plan review process. So,
But not necessarily the content?
no.
Okay.
Andrew? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a follow-up, Councilman?
No, that was it.
Andrew?
Thank you.
Yeah, let's start wide and then get specific. Regarding the two approaches that you guys had discussed proceeding, I understand this policy is going to get a lot more specific than the initial proposal did and sort of narrow its focus. I'm still very much in favor of proceeding with the other thing, with a much broader art policy within the city. But I think the initial proposal was far enough away from that where within a reasonable time frame, I don't think that we could get to where we needed to go and allow the murals that people want to have happen. But again, this is one step of many, and we can take that step, I hope, in the future. When we talk about establishing the requirements in the review process, is that only for public property and public right-of-ways, or is that also for private property? Is the application process the same?
Let me scroll down here. Oh, looking to see. Well, if you look in, and let me see if I can find the definitions here. And Matt, if you have it, let me know. But
I do. So if you look at definitions as installed public art, which would include public spaces, public assets, public property, public rights of way, or private party licensed to the city for the purposes of display. So would include both public and private property because, and I don't mean to steal Matt's thunder on this at all, but the thought process here is a number of these would otherwise be in violation of a sign ordinance, perhaps if they were viewed as a sign. We're saying that they are being licensed to the city for use for public art installations. That's the construct behind the policy.
So it's all being treated the same way because de facto, at the end of the day, it's all going to be public property. Even if it's private property, it's going to be leased to the city, and then the artwork is going to be displayed on that.
Licensed, correct, yep.
In that case, I think there's a couple of areas in which the review process is a little bit burdensome, especially for applicants that are, because there seems not to be a distinction between public and private property in this case, for the reasons we just explained. But if I'm trying to paint something on a property that I own, obtaining artist resumes of the intended work and professional references, if I'm going to paint it myself, sort of disqualifies a lot of mechanisms by which that can happen. Either be it by a paint by numbers thing, a student-led project, some amateurs or enthusiasts. I think there's a mural at Agua Dulce right now that was painted by enthusiasts and volunteers, not necessarily professionals. So I want to make sure that we leave space for all different sorts of mediums and people who are participating in the arts, and not that it's just some professional thing that's being contracted out all the time.
Yep.
But I mean, that's one example of several where I think that the review process is a little bit burdensome, and I think that if the intention of the policy is to have more murals within the city, we need to make that process as streamlined as possible.
Go ahead.
If I may, Mayor.
Sure.
So that's similar to a lot of other private property improvements that are required in the city. In the downtown historic district, you're required to get approval before you paint the facade of your building. We ask much the same information when you turn in an application to do that to the Historic District Commission. They want to know who's doing it, what type of material, making sure that it's done and it's done right before they grant approval. This is much the same way, and I think if we encounter those situations where it's a school-led group or somebody wanting to do, their own, maybe not getting it professionally done and spending $50,000, I think they can indicate that information into the application. We're still going to want to know the medium and the materials that are used to make sure it's not going to crumble off in a year, and provide that information. But generally, I think that review process is pretty consistent with many of the license requirements and site plan approvals that we get in our department from anybody who wants to install a new facade onto their building to make improvements, landscaping in the right of way, things of that sort. Those all come before in the zoning ordinance already. So this is similar to other processes that anybody would take for improvements onto private property.
Describe to me what the expectation is with the maintenance and sustainability plan. Essentially, I mean, that's almost a letter of commitment in my mind. If I promise to maintain this property for its useful life, sign your name. Okay, we're done. Next.
So in those instances too, in the license agreement that the city has with private property owners, when the mural goes up, we require them to maintain it. If it gets graffitied over, they have to repair it. If it's crumbling, they either have to repair the paint or paint over it. That's a sustainability plan we want to see, that if it starts crumbling, they're committing to maintaining it. If they're not going to do that, otherwise it's treated as blight, and the city has the right to go in and remediate it as such.
Property is owner's cost, is my understanding, which is described later in this document.
Yep, correct. And with the license agreement the city council approved on all the murals to date so far, the city, in a way to encourage public art and murals to be installed in the city, we do contribute towards some of that cost to decommission the mural when its life is over. So I think as part of the license agreement, our consideration is we'll contribute $300 to help paint it over when the life of the mural has come to an end. If it gets damaged, repaired, or disrepaired, it happened on our property on the mural at Boyd Park. It got graffiti and damaged a couple weeks ago. We went over, re-cleaned it. The muralist came back out and repaired it within a week. And so that was similar to the commitment that we would expect out of anybody else for public art. If a sculpture or something else starts crumbling, disrepair, falling apart, then the city wants to see, how are you going to maintain that? And do you have the funds to maintain it outside the one-time application? Because murals can be expensive, as we know. Not always, but sometimes it can be. So we want to make sure after it goes up, you can maintain it and it doesn't become blight.
And then finally, on the issue of funding, and I know I brought this up during my meeting with city administration as well. Well, the pages aren't numbered, but under the review criteria, it says it must be financed by the requesting party. All costs of the project must be financed by the requesting party. I just want to clarify, because previously in the document, it says it needs to, in the review process, installed public art, including anticipated non-city funding for artwork. So in both cases, we're anticipating that they're fulfilling all the costs except for the deaccession plans, is my understanding, or is there some city funds that are set aside for these projects?
So there are some city funds set aside, but a lot of times those are specifically with projects that city will commission. So for instance, this year, the Boyd Park steps, right? So we set aside the funding for that project. Sometimes there are grants we can go after as well to help offset some of those costs. So that's really where that comes in and is accounted for. What we anticipated in this review process, the reason why that was explicitly stated was if someone comes and they said, I want to paint this $40,000 mural and I want the city of Monroe to pay for it, that's not an automatic, yes, this is, 100% we're gonna fund this. It's something where, okay, what are your means of funds outside of the city of Monroe as well? So I think that's really the key component for including that in this.
Getting back a little bit, because I understand that the city has an interest potentially in commissioning its own works of art as well, and that we might want to take advantage of those funds for projects on public property. So, but now we're getting back into the separation of public and private property, because previously those lines are, everything's following the same process.
Right.
So I want to be clear on that. What I just want to be careful of as we move forward with any funding process is not to prioritize certain mediums of art over others, and to take a holistic approach to all the people who are creating a creative space within our community for people to express themselves. It's not just to say muralists and painters, you have a home here, but if you're a dancer or a musician or a potter or a glass blower, you can find a different place to be.
Yep.
So as we move forward and make a broader policy towards art within our community, I would like to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, sir.
So when you started, Andrew, I wasn't quite, I understood you. You think this is getting closer, but you think it should be broader than what I didn't understand your first opening.
So I think that what Matt said in the beginning of his presentation is there was two directions that
Right.
they could proceed with the policy. Either it has to be something much more encompassing and comprehensive in terms of how we proceed with the city's policy towards art within the city, or whether it should be specifically targeted towards murals. And my understanding from the policy that's in front of us tonight is we very much took the latter route.
Absolutely.
What I wanted to clarify is that I don't think that the former route is one that we should avoid completely in the future. I think that we still need to go down that road. It's just the policy that we had in front of us the last time we saw this document was in its current state insufficient to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to understand is this or your last comment about pottery and other things? Is that what you're speaking to, other art or other types of art? I'm trying to understand.
Well, I think that we need to have a more comprehensive discussion about how we provide, cultural and creative amenities within the city to create a vibrant space, especially in the downtown. Yeah, and I think that we should continue that conversation in the future.
If I could add too to Councilman Felder's comments, I think this is, and you'll see up at the top, I think V4. So version 4 of this that we went through. And around the version 2.5, I would say, we started getting pretty deep in the weeds in terms of all of the different mediums of public art. And then we started to realize there were conflicts within our existing ordinances and other areas. So even the conversations, I think, around, street performers, things like that, that have come up recently. I think, we call out certain areas in our ordinances, and I think some of those other areas need a little bit more focus in reviewing against our current ordinances, whereas some of these, items that we're calling out right now, we're calling out because we don't have anything pertaining to these. So I definitely
Discussions that the city manager and Matt and I had when we had this discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand it because if you're not part of the conversation, I'm trying to understand it.
That was my thing too. I was sort of taken aback that when I got to the meeting, that I was the only member of council in the room. Is I want to give every member of council an opportunity to be part of that discussion as we move forward, which is part of the reason I think that it needs to probably wait till a future date.
Well, I guess if we'd schedule a meeting, it'd be a work session, and then this one I was hoping to get here today.
Sounds wonderful to me.
If you already have it, then it, of course, puts a disadvantage to others that are sitting here. That's just my point.
I was under the perception that we all had the opportunity to comment on the policy. I apologize if that was not the case.
We did. I provided my comments, but I didn't know it was I passed my comments along. So I have a question, Max. I haven't seen all this here yet until I was reading through it, but I think I understand. But in relation, and maybe it's here, I just haven't glanced over it quick enough, but it was mentioned about downtown in historic district items. How is that going to be addressed? Is that in here? Is it something that is somewhere else that's covering it?
Yeah, so I believe it's under review criteria, the second to last bullet point. Project is presented in compliance with city codes, state and federal regulations, including but not limited to the attainment of all necessary permits, license agreements, and historic district requirements set forth by the Department of the Interior.
So we've had some public art that's gone up, murals currently, in a process that we had previously, or at least when we were following. There's something here, because I think it might go to one of the things that Andrew stated. It says here, maybe this clarifies it, a mural is a painting or other work of art executed directly on or affixed to a wall, because currently the one at Agua Dulce fit the old definition. It wasn't a mural because it was affixed to the wall. Mm-hmm. And they were artists from our community. They weren't, They were talented artists that did it, but I understand we're trying to say that they're both the same now, correct? Mm-hmm. Affixed or painted. I think the reason why you said, I understand why. So how does this, I guess, compare to what was approved before, or how the process we had before? And I know that I think some of the I think right after the art started, I think it's great. All the art is great. Don't get me wrong, but I think it started bleeding over into recognition of persons, phrases, words, and that wasn't permissible. But yet we have it now. So is that addressed in here, or what's going to be permissible in relation to those items?
Yeah, so I
I
think
saw the
that's
naming policy.
yeah, and I
reference.
think it's really it comes down to just kind of the standard, maybe even that same, just that's being considered now. I think before those weren't necessarily. I mean, there was not a city policy that pertained to reviewing of any, of these works. And I think it was really just a willingness of the groups that had done some of the previous art to come to the city first and say, hey, we're planning on doing this. Whereas now we have a policy that we can look at and we can evaluate each one based on our standards and criteria.
So we've had some other requests that are kind of on hold, not hold, they just haven't been through the process for this to follow through with, that have, obviously, they've raised funds and they're looking to paint a mural in the downtown district. I am assuming we've had conversation with them, or at least they've with us, to understand what that might be and if it's going to fit with what we're going to do, or are they still operating under a previous item?
To say, if you want to take that one.
If I may. Mayor and Councilman Felder, to your points about the review process. So one of the things that has happened concurrently as we've been reviewing the public art policy is we adopted a new sign ordinance that also addresses mural signs that City Council adopted, it was about 2 months ago now, I think. And so part of the review process, Councilman, is to make sure that any public art that's being installed or murals that are being installed meet all of these requirements as well that Matt laid out in this bullet point, to make sure it's meeting the Secretary of Interior standards in the historic district, to make sure it's being installed as public art and not meeting the definition of a sign. And so when we get these applications and we read a description of what's proposed and while Councilwoman, to your point about content, we're not so much looking at the content of the art, but if it's close enough where it's going to meet the definition of a sign mural, then we're going to review it against a sign ordinance. If somebody is planning to install a mural on the side of a building, Mayor, you mentioned Agua Dulce, we want to make sure that that's going to be installed safely, this was not the case, and I'm just using it as the example that was brought up, but Agua Dulce, we want to make sure that's not going to fall down on patrons who are sitting out on the patio. And so that's the intent and the purpose behind the review process, to make sure that it is meeting all applicable codes and laws and statutes and ordinances that the city already has in effect. So when we receive an application, Mayor, as a follow-up to your point, we're going to make sure that it's meeting all of the other standards. New public art that's proposed, we've got the new sign ordinance, and hopefully when City Council adopts the new public art policy, we're going to review it against those two. This process that Matt has drawn out and described in the public art policy follows much the same way that we reviewed the murals that were installed over the past 2 years, with the license agreement, seeing the artist portfolio, hearing a description of how it's going to be painted, what wall it's going to be on. So it's following much the same policy and practice as City Council has looked at. I'd say a major change is that Matt and I aren't the ones bringing to you for approval. This will be reviewed by the Planning Commission, much the same way as they review many other applications. And then the appeals process, if the Planning Commission either accepts or rejects an application, then the appeals body would be City Council after that. But the first line is the Planning Commission. So I'd say that's probably a very significant difference in the way that we've reviewed proposals currently to date.
So in the past, the content wasn't known of what was going to be done. I think that answers part of what Kelly asked, but we'd get as it was reviewed, the type of work of art in which the artist did was given as renderings of what could be there. But we're not going to know. The Planning Commission, are they going to get presented what their person's going to do, or what they do, and it'll be in likeness to that, or they be just, we're going to paint?
Yeah, we're gonna as some of the requirements that are on the application as we develop the application, how specific the description gets, looking at a portfolio of different works that have been done in the past, and then what are you planning to do on this site? Give us a full description, and then much like a site plan, the approval is based on the information that's been presented. If it doesn't meet the approval that's been granted, then we have another discussion to have about correction and making sure that it is designed, installed as it was presented and approved and described in the application. And part of that, I mean, we're gonna make sure that the applicants who are applying for public art know if it's in the historic district, here's the requirements you have to follow. Here's the city's naming policy. Here's the sign ordinance. Here's the things you need to avoid, and here's the way you get your project moving forward. As we like to say in our department, here's how we find a way to yes with the safeguards in place that you need to be aware of.
Brian, and then I'll go back to him.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I understand it, the approval process has to clear through the CPC, correct? Correct. They're the final body of approving or disapproving.
Unless they appeal the decision, then it comes to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Deaccession, same thing.
Yeah, so much of that would be carried out through what we do with blight enforcement. So if we drive by and we notice that the mural is in a state of disrepair, we need to have a conversation with the building owner because they're the ones that are responsible. It's not being maintained, you need to correct it. And, then that's a more of an enforcement discussion that we have. Planning Commission, obviously, anybody can bring concerns to city administration about condition of properties. And we would follow it through that process.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that there's one body that's going to make that final decision. Or in this one case, you said in certain instances, the city managers can make that decision because it's so blatantly bad or whatever it is. Am I correct in assuming that? Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess I'll follow up to Brian, because I was reading as you were speaking, I don't see where the accession goes back to the Planning Commission.
No, deaccession does not.
Okay, that's why I'll make sure I understood. Okay.
That's the way I understood it as well. Yeah, that's something that we can,
Comes back to the manager for,
or us.
And I think the benefit too in this process is that we have the plan ahead of time. We have the maintenance, plan. We have kind of their plan for upkeep. And so we can vet that against, if we do run into that situation, we can vet it against the plan and see if it's working.
Andrew?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on one of your points, Mr. Mayor, recently on, I believe in the application process, point 3, where it says in the past, what would happen is we were given photographs or pictures of the artist's previous work. This is asking for actually what is being proposed for this particular site, not necessarily what that artist has done in the past, but what they plan to do here. And I believe that's different
That's what I was asking.
from how it's moved forward. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions? So next steps are on this?
Well, what the whole purpose of bringing here is to kind of vet out these same exact questions and explain these things the same way. I'd like to be able to bring this in the format to make it an ordinance. And that would be the next step. If everybody's in agreement and everything in here has been completely explained and understood, I'd like to bring it back in that process at the next meeting.
So you're looking for feedback, if not.
Any feedback. If
moving
not,
forward.
this document, as you see it, will come in the form of a recommended ordinance at the next council meeting.
Brian?
I think the only thing I would possibly state on here, I mean, it's pretty clear to me, but make it blatantly clear that who's going to say that, who has the final say,
Right.
and deaccession,
For
how that's going to
deaccession.
work.
Okay.
Both ways, in and out. How that's going to go for the either the applicant or the person that has the art. That way, it's blatantly clear to them that if there's a problem, this is the body that's going to handle it.
Absolutely.
received recent requests from intended muralists or businesses that are asked. I know that we had a session a while ago and but a few people were here to listen to this. I just wonder if they've asked for additional information or is after we get through here.
Sometimes it doesn't come into me directly.
Well, some have interest, and then
Yeah.
and of course we had some of the murals we did for the past 2 years. So what their interest may be. I'm just curious where that's all sitting with others that are having interest as we get here into this fall winter season, but for the spring prepared.
Yeah, there's been a few different community groups and organizations and business groups who have approached us about wanting to do murals and being involved. And I'll say not just in murals painted on buildings, but also sculptures and installed public art in other places, not just on the side of the building. And we've informed them sort of the direction that we're going in the policy that we're proposing to City Council, and they're excited about it. I mean, they're very excited that City Council is having this conversation and open to it and trying to find a way, to put some boundaries and parameters on this. And so they're watching the process, and I think, there's arts of different forms, mediums, Councilman, to your point, different levels. Some people can't paint the entire side of Fedco going down I-75, but they have an interest in raising awareness in public art and art in general in the community in many different forms. And so we're happy to engage in that discussion, and they may be tuning in tonight.
Kelly?
In the application, the review process, where is that? When they are asking in number 3 for a drawing, model, photograph, other visual representation of proposed installed public art, especially in painting, a lot of times as you flow into it, could possibly change. Somebody could, I know we had this with the planting seeds. Somebody saw one of the artist's renderings and made a fuss about it. And so the artist had to take a different direction, which, just for the record, I completely disagree with that person complaining, but whatever. So it could change.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be a violation of the application process?
I think we can, Councilwoman, to your point, I think we can sort of, when we draft approvals or when we consider approval or even in the application, work with Attorney Buds. I kind of liken this to when City Council approves PUD agreements and they've got the design standards, the pattern book. This is a good example, the pattern book for Mason Run. We're not going to require each and every property to come before Planning Commission for approval after the standards have been adopted. You're giving administrative authority to the city administrative staff at that point to approve it. I think it can be the same way. The Planning Commission is going to approve it based on what was represented. And as long as changes that are made while the artist is, performing their craft is in the spirit and the intent in which the original approval was given, it won't be an issue. If there's drastic changes that are made, and obviously the level of reasonableness, reasonable changes, spirit, intent, will help. We'll ask Mr. Buds to help us craft that language, recognizing that tweaks could be made. However, still along the same lines, any of those changes would have to, not veer into the land of violating any ordinances or policies that the city already has in place.
So I guess that would take that to mean under the other requirements about installing public art as proposed to represent Canadian depictions, but it talks about the policies and procedures and the naming policy. Right?
Yeah, yep. And I think the naming policy, also thinking a lot about the sign ordinance, making sure that things aren't moving in from, public art into a sign. And so monitoring that throughout the entire process. And I'll say, I feel very comfortable with this ordinance from an administrative standpoint. I think when we were looking at murals for the past 2 years, we were trying to figure out how to work with those who really had a passion and a drive to move forward in the short term. But this is really putting lessons learned from the past 2 years through not just planting seeds, but others as well, how we put those parameters into place to make sure that we're staying in the lane of public art.
I have one more thing I'd like just to understand from council. Are you intent on having this be an ordinance, or can it simply be a policy? I think as a policy, there is still a method through a city policy for us to address issues, should there be some. Does it have to, because sometimes when it's an ordinance, then there's times that it can be seen as being, punitive, et cetera, whatever. I just want to make sure that we're bringing to you in the form that you envision is good enough to do that. For example, the naming policy, I don't believe is an ordinance, is it? No, it's a policy. And I don't believe that this should be necessarily an ordinance unless you require, I mean, when we first talked about it, it was given to you as to be a potential ordinance. But I'd like some clarification from you to see how strongly you feel about it being an ordinance, or if it would be okay just being a city policy.
Kelly?
I like the idea of it being a policy, and for the reasons that you said. Just because art is fluid, and and because this is a new thing that we're introducing to the art community and others, and we might have to tweak it along the way. And I don't want it to be difficult for us to have to make changes in its infancy.
Yeah,
Beginnings.
exactly. Brian?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Councilman Inviting. I'm not certain if we put it as policy versus ordinance, is there less bite to one versus the other? I guess it'd be more of a question for Matt.
Your Honor, if I may. So one of the things, if it's a policy that can be voted upon by council, it becomes the policy. If it's an ordinance, recall that's going to take public hearing, will be, I mean, I'll say that it's a little bit more onerous in terms of revision modification to that, rather than it being a policy that can be changed relatively simply in a one meeting decision. I think I'm comfortable in either way on its surface. For consistency purposes, for me, I see this more similar to like the naming policy and would consider it something more akin to that. But obviously it has interplay with the ordinances in terms of sign ordinance, zoning, those sorts of things that it might otherwise be involved with. So I'm comfortable either way. I think if you want more, I'll say fluid and the ability to change more easily, I think a policy is more appropriate for that.
So would it be safe to say that if we keep it as a policy, we have ordinances that will back it up?
I don't think I would word it that way necessarily. So there isn't an ordinance that says, here's what we're going to do with public art as it stands now.
Well, no, that's not what I meant. I mean, as far as, there's ordinances we have set as far as blight and whatnot. Those would back up that policy. Am I correct in saying that? Is that a better way of saying it?
Yeah, I think that is true. That,
Okay.
Look, you will still have ordinances that will need to be complied with regardless of what the policy would be.
Sure.
But I think there's also, from my perspective, the part I continue to go back to is the underpinnings of this are that it would be an area that is either public or is licensed to the public to use, so that we're not making a decision on, from a regulatory perspective, dear property owner, can you go put X, mural on the side of your building? If that falls under the sign ordinances and prohibited, it's prohibited. If it's licensed to the city is making a determination that this is important as a public art installation. That's the underpinnings behind what's before you as a draft policy now.
Andrew?
If I could follow up. Reverse of what Councilman Lamore asked, would this conflict with any of the existing ordinances that we have? And if it doesn't create too much of an administrative burden, would this be easier to follow by its own writing and avoid some of those conflicts if it itself held the same status? Maybe the answer is no. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
It's a great question, I think, because you can look at this in both fashions. It's a policy, then it drifts from the policy, and it may be something that is not quite what was expected. And now you have greater latitude to do that because it's only not saying only, it's a policy that has some of that can be fluid. So you allow I'll just say, I think this we ran into our last 2 years on murals. It separated from what the intent was and started to drift into things that were in contrary to the city's policy on naming. And so now we have it, and nobody here wants to be the person to say you got to paint that over after it's done. So policy allows, I think, as was stated, I'm not going to put this flower and put that. I'm not going to do this, and it allows space to move. An ordinance doesn't. But then on the other hand, if we find something on the ordinance that is just too challenging, we have much more to go through to make that change. So you can look at it two different ways, and it's not saying one is correct and one is not correct. It just means there's different processes of what's going to have to occur. And if we have a policy, we just have to, I think as the Planning Commission and as the council, have to understand what we are approving and how we stay as close to that as possible. Otherwise, we will be drifting. This is my view.
See why I ask now?
So for instance, the Selma Rankins Garden, that was in the mural painting from this most recent one. So of course, it's always been the Selma Rankins Community Garden. But then we created this naming policy. And so I guess that would be an example of what Mr. Mayor is speaking of, with that coming into conflict with the naming policy, because we never went through the naming policy to name the garden. We just named it that, but that was like 9 years ago before we had a naming policy. So I think for me, that would be an instance of me preferring to keep this as a policy because, well, it's just my personal opinion, even though it might, because the naming policy is not an ordinance either. So we didn't violate an ordinance per se. We did violate a policy, I guess you could say, if you wanted to. But I would want to come back, and if I was asked to remove that name because we were in violation of the policy, I would want to come back and fight against that, to say I want to keep the name on there, and I want somebody to be able to decide that we can do that or not do that without having to go through all of these processes. So that would be a perfect example of why I think keeping it as a policy, because that was like something that happened that we didn't look into all the conflicting areas when we designed the mural. So if something like that was to come up, I would like it to be able to come back before the Planning Commission or the City Council or whoever that body was to be able to talk about that and possibly keep it or change it, whatever the case might be. Even with the photo on the community center, on the T-shirt of the lady on that mural, that's an image of a person, Gil Scott Heron. So the artist had a reason why, what the significance was to Monroe, but that could be considered going against a policy of depicting an image. So just different, I think that's why that's a further argument for why I would want to keep this a policy.
And I guess that's my argument why it could be an ordinance. Because we didn't have a rendering of the Selman Rankins Gardens. It was done. The artist's revision or artist's renderings of what was going to go on the Opportunity Center didn't have an image. And we know the naming policy and the reasons why. I mean, we sat on that committee with Mr. Felder there, and we presented that to council for the reasons why we dialogued through that for months and months, over a year. and why that there was a time frame for, we would not put living persons and they had to be deceased 3 years. And then there's also trying to, it's not about, it's art versus the message. And so I just, I don't think that anybody's going to go and have the council here to repaint over Selman Rankins garden, because I don't think that's what we're doing here. We're moving forward to what's going to be in the future. When you start putting sayings and words, then it becomes a sign. And I said, so artists take liberties in their work. I understand that, but I think we have to make it so it's somewhat understanding what the outcome is going to be when we start this process. And if we can't manage that through a policy or an ordinance, then we need to reconsider what we're doing and how we go forward on public art. I'm not opposed to public art. That's not it. This has been the same discussion for well over a decade, is if we allow art to go as it is, then we should be willing to have it, whatever the outcome is. And I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I don't think that's what this policy proposal is saying. But there's, some structure is going to then not have to have the question after it's presented, and then have to ask if it's in conflict. That's all. Kelly?
Your Honor, I definitely think we can manage this through a policy, and we just have to be more diligent about cross-checking all of the, because me personally, I didn't check. I was just so excited that murals were going up. I didn't read any policies, or even though I was on the naming committee, and it was a long, arduous process, and we got through it. I was just excited about seeing a mural go up, but I'm sure it'll be in the capable hands of the Planning Commission and others who are to cross-check those things, and I think we can do that through a policy.
And I'm not saying it can't be. I think it can, but then we also have the fortitude when it's presented in not the way in which it was intended to understand that something has to be changed, and after it's done, it's going to be very challenging to say why. And I don't think that's the case, but the diligence up front I thought was done, and that's not what kind of came out to be. Andrew?
With it being a policy, is it easier for staff to issue exemptions to the rule? I believe that Mr. Cochran was just up here talking about that in the case of requiring artists' resumes and references, that staff would make a decision just to waive that in certain cases. Does it being an ordinance make that a more difficult process?
Looks like an attorney
I
question.
was just say that. I think that sounds like an attorney question. From my perspective, I would think that anyone that is seated up here would be just as displeased with a policy violation as they would be an ordinance violation. To me, I don't see them as one being more flexible than the other, unless by their terms they say that, right? So, I mean, unless the policy says, there's discretion on an item for the director of economic and community development or the city manager or things like that, then we're going to follow the policy that's there just like we would follow an ordinance, unless council made an exception to the policy that's in place. That's how I would envision that.
After having been up here saying that I felt that the policy was more restrictive from the onset, I don't know that I'd feel that offended if certain parts of the policy were, and maybe that means that they just need to be voided out entirely in the final draft. And I know that there are consistency issues with the sign ordinance, and I believe that my comments regarding the sign ordinance were similarly that parts of it I felt to be a little bit restrictive. And in the conversations I've had with residents, I think I stand on firm ground when I say that. The policy is what the policy is now. At this point, we're going to go forward. But in this process where we're still working with drafts, maybe it would behoove us to include some of those exemptions, or to determine what is really necessary as part of this and get rid of all the things that are just adding fluff.
I'm not sure I understand.
I think it's required in terms of the policy to provide one specific item that the artist gets recognition for the work of art or signs off on it in some way. Is it illegal if they don't get recognition for the work of art then? Like, can I waive my right if I'm the artist? Some of this stuff is just, yeah, it'd be nice to have. Do we need to write it into the law? Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, I think the reason for that was if if a say there's a sculpture and Fedco pays for the sculpture but they want to do it and they, just that step of, okay, we want to recognize the artist, we don't want to recognize the artist, just that's included in this, and to see if it does if they're recognizing the artist in a way that violates the naming rights policy. I think that's another consideration there, but we can, it's flexible. If council feels that they don't want to include that, that's fine.
And I'm not trying to strip out critical components, but some of the stuff to me seems not to be critical. I gave 3 specific examples of things that I felt didn't really need to be there.
And if they're not there, is there a different result because they're not there? I always say if something's not there, then it gives latitude to do as they wish. And
Hopeful that we have these discussions.
it makes me less supportive. I'm not that restrictive. I think that it can't have space, but I think the less that's there just gives latitude for greater growth and in interpretation beyond what we're talking about. And that's been the conversation from day one on murals in the city.
I think it's worth talking about.
Brian?
My understanding is if we keep this as a policy, we're making it less constraining as far as being able to change or adapt to different things. Whereas if we make it an ordinance, we have to go through all of the different red tape in order to basically change that ordinance to adapt to what we want it to change to. So to me, it makes a little bit more sense to be a little more fluid and have it as a policy versus an ordinance, simply because it's allowing us more latitude to move what we want in the right direction.
So just so clear, I'm not saying this should be an ordinance. I'm just saying if it's a
No, I
policy,
understand.
we had to make sure that we adhere to what the intent and purpose was when we started and not have something different than when we started. That's all. Any other questions? Well, it's 12 after, and I always want to make sure we have time in between. So thank you, Matt, very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And the conversation's been great. Mr. Robinson, anything further?
It's work session, sir.
And I know it's on here as other items as time permits. We just have a few minutes if there's something that any council member wants to, I see on an agenda item that you want to discuss or have a question for the manager before the meeting. I guess we've got just a couple of minutes here, 3 minutes or so, maybe 5. I don't see any. Very well. So we have a few minutes here. At this point, we'll close the work session. Close the work session, and the council meeting will begin at 7:30. Thank you. Call the city council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining. Germaini. Lamore.
Present.
Whitman. Steelgrave. Mayor Clark.
All please rise for the invocation. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We have faith and hope in each other and our city. We ask for your guidance in the decisions that are made here this evening. We ask that you help us to work for the welfare of this community and all who call her home.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
please.
The next item is the approval of the regular agenda.
Mr. Robinson, any adjustments to the agenda that you have?
There is no adjustments at this time, Your Honor.
I'll look at the council, see if there's any adjustments. Seeing none. Councilman Lamore?
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Stillgrave, to approve the regular agenda. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining. Germaini.
Yes.
Lamore.
Yes.
Felder.
Yes.
Whitman. Steelgrave. Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item is the consent agenda, and for approval of payments, which is item B, the amount should read $2,713,367.48. 2713367.48.
Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Any items on the consent agenda? Any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? Any items that appear on the consent agenda? Seeing none, motion be in order.
Your Honor,
Councilman Feller.
I'd like to make a motion that all items on the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted.
Councilman Felder, supported by Councilwoman Germaini, that all items on the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted.
Councilperson Vining. Germaini. Lamore.
Yes.
Felder.
Yes.
Whitman.
Yes.
Steelgrave.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is item 4217, CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson?
Yes, Your Honor, and council members, I'd like to ask Caitlin McBrayerty from our Economic Development Office to give a little bit of a presentation to explain the annual performance and evaluation report that is required for the public hearing for the CDBG grants.
Thank you. And Caitlin will give us a kind of introduction and information, and we'll open the public hearing from those comments. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Clark and council members. The city has completed the 2022-2023 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, also known as the CAPER, for our CDBG program. The CAPER is a yearly report that shows the city's accomplishments towards meeting the goals and objectives outlined in the 5-year consolidated plan that we submit to HUD. Just a few notes on the 22-23 year. The city spent just over $100,000 on programs, and 100% of that went to assist low and moderate income persons. And that was done through our partnerships with MCOP, Legal Services of South Central Michigan, and One Sheep Ministries. Last year, we were able to help 2 homeowners rehabilitate their home. 26 households were assisted with mortgage and rental assistance. 384 persons in 118 households received food assistance, and 100 households received legal assistance to prevent foreclosure or eviction. So it was just a quick overview of our CAPER and what we did last year, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Caitlin. Any questions from council for Caitlin? And if not, we'll open the public hearing.
Hi, Caitlin. Could we get those numbers sent to us? Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'll open the public hearing for item 4217, the CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report Public Hearing. Any comments from those present here this evening regarding this public hearing? Any comments from those present? Any further comments from council? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4228, Monroe Community Players Day, September 9, 2023.
Thank you. I'll start, and then I'm going to come down and meet a representative from the community players who will join me. But I think what a great week it's been to hear and read about the community players, about their longevity, how long they've been doing performances, and really serving the community through their, I'll say, their arts and venue to the betterment of our community. So I'm going to come down, and Nancy Williams is going to join me. I'll be right down. If you could join. It says it's on. There it is. Well, thanks for joining me here. It's not going to. I'll try it again. There we go, right to the top. So as I said, there's Nancy will help be here. I wanted to present on behalf of the City Council a proclamation recognizing the community players, Monroe community players, and their longevity. As I said, it was great to read the information that was sent, articles that were written, things I've heard on radio, just to think about all the years. So I'm going to read some of the proclamation here before I present it and give you an opportunity to kind of reflect on that, but also opportunity to tell the community what's coming here real soon, and we better make decisions quickly if we're going to attend. So this is a proclamation that says it's an honor and privilege that the Mayor and City Council have been given this opportunity to pay tribute to the Monroe community players commemorating their 75th anniversary. And the community players was established in 1948 by William D. and Maria Beatrice Smith and friends. The community players were officially celebrate their 75th with special programs coming on September 9th at their studio theater, which you'll talk about. The community players have been a staple in our community, providing shows and for audiences wanting to see. They encourage and support the arts and provide cultural opportunities and experiences for the citizens of Monroe. And it says, whereas in 2009, the Monroe community players performed performance of their original script Upon the Heath.
Heath, yes.
And Heath is breaking the microphone here. Won the top award for the Michigan American Association of Community Theaters Fest. They have had many successful collaborations with the Historical Society of Monroe County and the River Race National Battlefield Park. And on behalf of the council, we're honored to share this anniversary celebration with the Monroe community players. And therefore, I, Robert E. Clark, Mayor of the City of Monroe, in full support of the City Council, do hereby proclaim September 9th, 2023 as Monroe Community Players Day in Monroe. And we take this opportunity to hereby extend our heartfelt congratulations and best wishes to community players for this memorable occasion. So I want to present this to Nancy and give her a chance and an opportunity to kind of speak to maybe not all the years, but some of the years, and let's move forward, and also announcement. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Right down.
Okay, thank you very much. Is my voice coming through?
There you go, just turn it a little bit that way.
Like this way? Okay, I got it. I'm used to directional mics, so you know, I'm a slow learner here. I am so honored to represent Monroe Community Players today with receiving this recognition for our 75 years of consecutive live theater performances in Monroe County. We started out at the old Lincoln School on that stage. We moved to the old Monroe High, the new Monroe High, RRCA, Myers Theater, all over the place. And we currently are developing our studio theater at the Mall of Monroe. And we're about halfway there, and we are performing there, shows once a month, comedies, dramas, children's productions, some original scripts. Some of the scripts are good, and some of the scripts are okay. but they're original. They are original. They are original and no royalties, so that's a good thing. One of the things I wanted to be sure to mention is our big celebration this Saturday. I'm so excited that that's been named Monroe Community Players Day. And we are doing an original play written by 6 community players members. And there's some real interesting things like Mark Twain, Hamlet, and the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz do a soft shoe. Bloody Mary and a gaggle of pretty wild soldiers do a conga line through the crowd. Plus, we have a montage of an assortment of musical songs linked together, performed by 10 of our members, as well as some interesting other musical and comedy sketches. And there are only 10 seats available, so if you want to come and see our production and you want to support the development of this wonderful studio theater for Monroe, please come. And thank you again. I really appreciate this honor.
Thank you. There's 10 seats. That's the only ones that are left. The rest is sold out. So as long as there's more than 10 people, it's going to be a very packed house.
Sold right now.
Wonderful. So congratulations and look forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah? You don't want it upside down, do you?
No, we don't. That would be funny, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is under council action. It's item 4222, Mason Run PUD Amendment Professional Services Change Order.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson?
Yes, Your Honor, and council members, as we discussed in the working session today, when we talked about the further development of the Mason Run neighborhood, and as we've been working with MKSK, which is our professional planning services, we are asking the council to consider giving us a revised total of $23,000 in total project cost, an additional $9,000, putting the total purchase order over the city manager's approval authority of $15,000 to help us move this forward.
Is there any questions for Mr. Robinson from council? I will say that earlier this evening, we had a work session and there was a presentation by staff regarding the Mason Run planned unit development, opportunities that are presenting themselves to infill housing and also to complete part of that phase of Mason Run that was never completed over the years. So it's really good news that was presented and the process that we'll have to go through. This is tied to that because of the professional services and the change order for some additional items that need to be addressed. So if you have an interest, for those that are here or those that are watching here in the council meeting and didn't attend the work session, you'll the opportunity to go back and watch that the replay there and or live streaming, and you can I should say the YouTube, and then you could hear about the Mason Run development as it's moving forward. So look forward to that. So if there's no other questions, motion would be in order. Councilman Lamore?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised agreement and authorize the payment of a sum not to exceed $23,000 to MKSK Incorporated for professional services regarding the Mason Run Planned Unit Development Agreement.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Steelgrave. Item 4222, the Mason Run PUD Amendment for Professional Services Change Order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Vining? Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder? Whitman? Stillgrave? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4216, Water Department Distribution Service Truck Replacement Change Order.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes, Your Honor and Council, this is a change order as we, the Water Department and Council itself approved an amount of $76,425.45 back in February 22 for the purchase of the water distribution truck replacement project. Well, apparently when we were in 2022, we were unable to get that truck because of GM wasn't providing the right chassis or what have you for that truck. And now, currently, they are now making the one that we found a suitable replacement. However, like everything else, it now costs more money. And so we're asking the change order to amend that $76,425 to $93,549. And if you want the specifics on the truck, Barry Leroy is here, can give you all the specifics, but that's the gist of the request.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Robinson from council? So read through this fact sheet. Obviously, there's adjustments and changes, and it's well over a year ago when we started the process. And I did find it of interest of the service truck we have, and the value of that is diminished in its capability to even be serviceable, which impacts now the ability to turn that in as a somewhat of a return of cost. So we used it for another year plus, and then that's why the change order comes, because of the amount. So if there's no other questions from council or comments, a motion would be in order. Councilwoman Germaine.
I'll make a motion. Item 4216, move to award a purchase order change order to increase the February 22nd, 2022 award amount to be increased to $93,549 to Todd Wenzel Chevrolet for the service truck replacement purchase in accordance with the attached proposal, that the Director of Water and Wastewater or his designee be authorized to sign all necessary documents on behalf of the City of Monroe, and to authorize the Finance Director to make the necessary budget transfers from the water fund reserves to cover the additional expenses.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Germaine, supported by Councilman Lamore on item 4216, the Water Department Distribution Service Truck Replacement Change Order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining? Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore? Felder? Whitman? Stillgrave? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is 4218, review and recommendation of proposals for the 212 East Front Street property.
Your Honor and Council, I'd like to ask Mark Cochran to come up and kind of highlight and outline the specifics of each proposal. We received two proposals of people wishing to purchase that building. And in your packet, you're provided with the proposals themselves. And Mark will give a very highlighted overview of what was in each proposal.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. Mark Cochran, Director of Economic and Community Development. So this evening, we're bringing forth to you two proposals that were received for the property that the city owns at 212 East Front Street. You may recall this is the former operations building for Monroe Bank and Trust and then First Merchants Bank this would be the southeast corner of Front and Macomb Street. So by way of background related to this site, in 2021, City Council approved a purchase agreement for the amount of $599,000 for both the building, which was the operations center, as well as the parking lot that came with it in between the Register of Deeds office on Macomb Street and the property at 212 East Front Street. At the time, the intent, going back to the fact sheet when City Council approved this, the intent was to renovate and add on to the building for the new police station. As we know, subsequently after that, the city had worked with an architect to find out how much it would cost to renovate the facility for use as a police station. And at the time, it was determined that the cost was just as much to build a new police station in a public safety office at 911 East 3rd with the new fire station. And so the direction was given to move away from exploring the police station on this site. And so with that, we looked at what are other opportunities for the site's redevelopment, what could it be used for. We also intentionally purchased this site because the city had an interest in the parking lot. You may recall recently City Council approved the PUD rezoning for the block around the former Central Fire Station at 75 Scott Street. Just east of that is a parking lot that's owned by the County of Monroe, and that site would be used as part of the redevelopment of the fire station site. And so we had to look at a plan to move those county employees who park in that parking lot. And so that was the other reason that we purchased this site, was to hang on to that parking lot for additional public parking as well as daytime parking for county employees to help facilitate the redevelopment of the former fire station site. And so during that time when we were looking at the site for the fire or police station, we also completed some environmental site assessments using funding provided by the Downriver Community Conference Brownfield Consortium and also the City of Monroe's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, to look at what are the environmental conditions on that site, knowing that it used to be the Sears automotive repair facility. And so we knew there were some concerns there, so we completed the environmental assessments. And I'll say there is some ongoing monitoring that we're doing on that site as a result of some of the concerns that were identified in the phase 2. Following the decision not to use the site for the police station, we started talking to several interested parties who were interested in occupying the site using different means and methods of purchase, lease, option, and such. And earlier this year, on June 20th, City Council approved a lease with an option to purchase with W&R Opportunity Fund. Briefly, the terms in summary of that agreement that was approved by City Council were for 1 month, $1 a month lease for a year, a $5,000 option to purchase for 1 year with the purchase price, if executed, of $275,000. Part of that agreement included that W&R Opportunity Fund would be responsible for the property taxes. Following City Council's approval of that agreement, we had quite a bit of back and forth with W&R Opportunity Fund, and unfortunately couldn't come to an agreement related to the assessment of property taxes. And given the fact it had been about 6 weeks since the negotiations were ongoing and that hadn't been executed, City Administration notified W&R Opportunity Fund that our offer and the agreement was withdrawn, considering that the agreement was rejected due to the fact it hasn't been executed. Also around that time afterwards, we started receiving interest from other parties as well. About that same time, we walked 3 other interested parties through the building, recognizing that the agreement hadn't been executed. What we did that we thought was the most fair way to handle it was on August 4th, City Administration issued a request for proposals to all 4 interested parties. Each received the same notification, including the original party that was part of the agreement, W&R Opportunity Fund, asking for the submission of highest and best sealed bids to be delivered to the city clerk's office, which were opened on August 11, 2023. Some of the information that we highlighted in the request for proposals were information regarding proposed terms of purchase, whether this was cash, contingent upon financing, whether this was going to be a lease, an outright purchase, an option. We were really open to all different types of proposals, considering wanting to hear from the 4 different parties. And so on August 11, 2023, the city received 2 proposals. One was from the River Raisin Center for the Arts, and the other was from Weens Acquisitions, LLC. Both of those proposals were included in your packet and part of the agenda packet this evening. In overview, the first proposal that we received from Weens Acquisitions, LLC, their proposal included a 12-month lease with an option to purchase. There would be a $5,000 non-refundable option deposit also to serve as rent for 1 year. So $5,000 for both the option and the rent for the year, not 2 separate payments. The lease would commence on January 1st, 2024, or mutual agreeable date for tax purposes. The option to purchase if it would convey ownership of 114 Cass Street to the city of Monroe. The assessor's office current true cash value that we have on file is for $249,215. That property is on Cass Street. It's owned by the RRCA. For familiarity purposes, it's behind Misty's restaurant at the corner of Cass and First Street. In addition to conveyance of ownership of that property, the city or the RRCA would pay the city $75,000 cash at closing. The RRCA would lease the parking lot on the west side of the building at 212 East Front Street. So the parking area that's immediately adjacent at the corner of Front and Macomb Street, not the parking lot in between the facility and the Register of Deeds that would remain with the city for $1 for 5 years. And the city would be responsible for maintaining that parking lot as needed. Additionally, the River Raisin Center would lease back the property at 114 Cass Street at closing from the city for a period of up to 1 year while they're preparing to occupy 212 East Front Street for full occupancy with a cost to be determined later. They did include a 60-day due diligence period with the closing to occur no later than October 16, 2023. I failed to mention the proposed use that was included with each proposal. In proposal number 1, they intend to occupy or open a real estate office in a portion of the building and then work with the city to identify potential tenants for the remainder of the building that's not occupied by the real estate office. River Raisin Center for the Arts intends to relocate and consolidate their operations that are in a couple different facilities at the Benish Building and also 114 Cass Street onto this property for dance studio and other instructional programming that was identified in proposal number 2. Any questions on the proposals?
Councilman Lamore?
Thank you. Main question would be on the parking lot lease. Am I correct in hearing that the RCA is proposing?
Yep.
And you said it was the west side and the east side would be basically included with the purchase of the building?
Right. So they're offering to lease back to the city just the parking lot on the west side of the building. The east side of the building was not part of that. There's a parking lot at Wadsworth and Front Street that wouldn't be leased back to the city.
Oh, I see. So they'd lease it back to the city for
Yep. $1 a year for a period of 5 years, which could be extended after that.
So just to clarify, because when Councilman Lamore asked, it's the west side toward Macomb that is wanting to be leased back.
Yep.
But the space that's on the east side toward Wadsworth is part of the acquisition.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And with all the parties, we notified them and indicated that the city would parcel off the parking area in between where Lake Erie Transit is currently hosting their bus stop due to the construction on First Street. From that drive aisle over to the Register of Deeds office would be spun off as a separate parcel and remain as a city public parking as we intended originally and always with the purchase of the building. So some information for City Council as you consider consider these two proposals. The assessor's office true cash value that we have on file for 212 East Front Street currently is $1,548,914. Sorry for the typo on the slide. And so both parties are offering to purchase the building for $275,000. The true cash value is approximately $1.5 million. The use that has that designated as 1.5 by the assessor's office right now is for office and warehouse space. So that the assessment is due to change as every property is assessed on December 31st, 2023 for the following tax year. So whatever use or occupancy is in the building, as well as the true cash value will be determined December 31st, 2023 for the upcoming tax year. Some of the considerations and observations as well. We have a lot of discussion here at the city. Recently, we purchased some properties strategically, and I wanted to highlight some of the considerations. Many people come to the city offering us to buy their property for a whole myriad of reasons. And the city approaches certain building owners or property owners as well with an offer to purchase their property. But when we make those decisions and when we bring those requests to City Council, some of the considerations that we think about when we purchase and then also when we desire to convey those properties are, is this a sound financial decision to make? Is it a smart investment to buy this property? Will the return be positive? And when we talk about the return, there's a cost and a value. There's the cost to purchase the building. There's a cost to make some improvements, the environmental assessments and the conditions. But there's also a value proposition there as well. If a building has sat empty for many years, when we think about the Monroe Optical Building, the Whistle Stop, and some of the other properties that have been purchased, they've not reached their highest and best use. They've sat underutilized, vacant, blighted for quite some time. They have impediments to achieving highest and best use and redevelopment. And we look at, does the city have an opportunity to make some investment strategically into these properties to help remove those impediments, help jumpstart the redevelopment of these sites for the benefit of the community, for the neighborhood, for the TIF district? And a lot of times when we buy these properties, we have our own interests. In this case, it was to build a new police station. It was to buy the parking lot so we can redevelop the entire fire station site. Sometimes it's because we have tools and access to tools that private developers may not. When we think about grants and loans, there's frequently different terms for municipalities than private developers. An example of that is the Downriver Community Conference offers grants to municipalities to pay 100% of the cost of assessments. For private developers, they only fund 50%. Sometimes that's a big difference to get these projects over the finish line. And so we look at, what are all the conditions of the property? Can the city use its tools, its resources, its knowledge, expertise to facilitate the site's redevelopment for a higher and better long-term use for the benefit of a TIF district and priority development corridor, such as the Downtown Development Authority, the Telegraph Road Corridor Improvement Authority, which of course receive their funding and make their investments because they get tax revenue. So when we think about selling a property, we often think, what is the tax benefit? What is the overall financial situation that we're looking at? Is this going to bring value in the terms of higher tax base for the city of Monroe as well? We also look at, can we use the building to attract a new business to the city that will help develop a critical mass of visitors and business patrons? So when we look at the downtown, we try to cultivate a spirit of entrepreneurship while filling an identifiable gap. And what I mean by that is there an opportunity to help entrepreneurs chase their dreams, invest in their business, and the city can alleviate some of the burden that comes with acquiring a property so that they can invest into a successful business and then take the property over from there from the city so that they're not capital poor and can build a successful business. When we look at identifiable gaps, in 2017, we did a market analysis for the downtown. We saw where the gaps are for the market, identified for breweries, for specialty grocery stores, for one of the identified gaps was for restaurants and experiential dining opportunities, where there's a real market and a growth for that in the downtown, and how can we use properties that we've bought or assembled to help fill those gaps that we see exist in the community. And so I'd encourage council, when we think about these two proposals that we've received, when we have these considerations that, we've deliberated on every property acquisition and every property conveyance, whether it be an infill residential site or a new commercial site, are we meeting these marks? And are we achieving the objectives from when we originally bought the property and where we want to see our city go in the future? So with that, I'd I'll turn it over to Mayor, if I may, to City Manager Robinson to provide more thought input into the two proposals as well as a recommendation.
Mr. Robinson?
Your Honor and council members, I spent a long time going through both of these proposals. I also had numerous meetings with our economic development crew. And for me to understand what is our long time, policy, what is our purpose and goals for how we're developing and when we're purchasing properties and how we're positioning and exactly what we're looking at and what is our how does it fit our general plan and our map going forward. And in reading both of these proposals had very compelling humanistic reasons for why they wanted the property. And, one of them has ideas of designing with the entrepreneurship and ideas to bring business into the city. And it would be, hopefully it would be after a year of leasing it, it would be an actual purchase of a price where we would actually receive some capital back, et cetera, from our initial investments, et cetera. And then we would obviously be able to receive it's approximately $48,000 a year as the business stands now. If it was sold as simply office space and warehouse, that would be the actual taxes that would be coming into the city on an annual basis. The other proposal was very strong with their needs to combine, their needs to change where they're leaving or where they're currently at, and for safety, security, and for the basic promotion of more arts and culture in our city. And I think that they're very, very compelling. I think that we're all in support of arts and council, and I think that the culture aspect and the safety aspect and their reasoning for wanting to have their business offices and some studios in one location and not there, I think all of those are very admirable. But with all that being said, we sent the RFPs out to 4 people that expressed interest. Those are the only 4 people we sent those RFPs out. Am I correct?
Yep.
And those were people that came to us, that had interest, that heard word of mouth, this building's for sale, blah, blah, blah. I always have to remember as a city manager, I am also the business manager of our city. And when I do that, it means I also have to consider what our financial status is and what our prospective financial situation is going to be. And I have to look at what is a good deal. Are we getting our money's worth? Understanding all of the things that Mr. Cochran just pointed out to you that, there's sometimes we admit we're not going to make all of our money back that we've invested in the property, but our value is what we're getting out of that property. But when I looked at these 2 proposals, I don't quite understand the lease option for a year. I mean, you're an investment real estate company. You want to lease our property for a year and then decide whether you want it or not. And for, what was it, $1? Was that? No, it was the $5,000 for the year in rent. And we're still responsible for everything. And at the end of 12 months, we are exactly where we were, unless we're kind of like the proving ground for their business ideas to see if their business ideas take hold and become profitable. Because I wouldn't imagine they would continue forward if they didn't think it was profitable. So there's a risk for us there. And the offer of the price to purchase it was not to me, very lucrative or very satisfying to the investment that we have into that property. Now, when you look at the other proposal, the one from the River Raisin Community of Arts, I think that it's an extremely compelling story and a completely compelling reason. And I understand it and I like it. I do really like it. But when you look at it from a business standpoint and a financial standpoint, I don't see where that benefits the city from a financial standpoint. Now, I understand arts and culture bring people, I get all that. But from looking at just the numbers, not looking at what they're doing and what the potential is, looking at the numbers, it's a tough thing to accept because they're offering a building that they currently own. that really doesn't fit into our master plan of buildings of what we were looking at for purchase anyway. And we have to remember they're also a tax, what's the word I'm looking for? They're tax exempt. So any of the property taxes, et cetera, they'd be paying on that building we would never receive that as well. And I just want you to understand when you're looking at these and take in the full. So that's why my recommendation is we have not even exercised the option of sending out a general RFP out there to really get what the true value, what the true interest is. We've only sent the RFP out to just the 4 people who verbally approached us with interest to this building. And I would be remiss if I were to pick one or the other right now and not bring those things to your attention when we do have the option of still rejecting both offers currently, and with directing our Economic and Development Department to put out an RFP, a little bit more specific, and open the RFP out to all businesses that might be interested in that location with the parameters that the city is looking for. That's my recommendation, if anybody has any questions.
Yes.
In the interest of transparency, when City Council approved the original lease and option, it did include a purchase price of $275,000. And when I went back and looked at when City Council approved that, we did a presentation. We purchased the property for $599,000. We value the parking lot at about $300,000, leaving the remainder of the cost for the building. Now, recognizing it is valued total at $1.5 million, so we were only looking at what we paid in that term. We also thought there was going to be about $25,000 worth of environmental assessment work that we had to do, which turns out when we did additional environmental assessment work, we did not have to do that. And that's how we landed in the original option and lease agreement at $275,000 for the amount. And that was, publicly available for anybody to watch that presentation, and recognizing both entities submitted that number as the proposed purchase price. So I wanted to open that up. Also, in the proposal submitted by the River Raisin Center for the Arts, they offer to convey ownership of 114 Cass Street and indicate in the proposal that the city had previously possibly expressed some interest in that property. There was a time when I understand the RRCA was looking at some different options in expanding on their current site, which would have included the city parking lot on that would be behind the Johnson Finney building. And so we thought, as we had thrown out there as an opportunity at that time to facilitate that growth and development with the theater, that we could do a land swap possibly if they were going to build on that city parking lot to mitigate that and move the public parking across the street at Cass Street. Those plans, I understand, haven't moved forward, or at least those discussions haven't moved forward, but I want City Council to be aware where the city's interest or expressed interest in 114 Cass Street was previously as part of that other proposed redevelopment option.
Any further?
Your Honor, he had a question.
Councilman Felder?
If we're to that stage,
Yes.
I want to make it known to the council that I am a contractor for the River Raisin Center for the Arts, and as such, I believe I have a conflict of interest on this item, and I would humbly request the council to allow me to recuse myself and abstain from voting.
But, obviously, we were employed and obviously with the Center for the Arts, and it is appropriate to, are you asking to be recused or?
Vote for me to abstain, don't we?
Abstaining and recusing, because abstaining means you won't vote. Recusing means you'd leave the room and not be party to the conversation that goes on. And the other part is you could abstain, but understand that you don't have party to the conversation as well. So those are, I'm not the city attorney, but I look into Mr. Buds.
Your Honor, I would say that based on the information presented by Councilman Felder, that it would be appropriate under the charter that he not vote on the question due to a direct personal interest as a representative of our RRCA, as he indicated. And so it would be my position that that would apply to voting in this matter. In the past, we've had to have council vote because the next clause in the charter talks about on all other questions that a council person would vote unless excused by a majority vote of the council persons elect. Here, I believe that because of his direct personal interest, it be appropriate that he not vote and abstain from a vote on this particular matter. And I don't believe that it requires a vote of the council to approve that.
Okay, so I'll just say if there's any council member that disagrees with that, now would be time to say that you don't feel that councilman should be abstaining from the vote. Okay, I'll take that to mean that it is an abstention of the vote. I have a couple questions for you. So I might have, it's raining, maybe we can
Sorry.
hear that, like, I don't, as long as it doesn't rain like it did recently, it'll be okay. But that said, you had made a comment, and I know it's in the fact sheet here on the first bid that was presented was, the offer was purchase price for $275. And I thought you said both was, but that's not the case, correct? So the one is a purchase of $275 and the RCA is $75,000, correct?
My mistake, yeah.
Okay, I thought I
Yep.
heard both. I just wanted to be clarified in case somebody else heard what I heard as well. I might have more questions, but I want to see if there's any comments or questions from council. Councilwoman Viney.
Forgive me, Mark, I don't remember all of this. I remember us purchasing the building and all that. But first, I have to say that I do agree with Mr. City Manager in that I would like to see it widely distributed to see what other type of businesses might be interested. Also, as a layperson, I'm not understanding if the true cash value is 1.5. Why is it that we are considering accepting $275,000? Am I missing something? And what type of business is this W&R Acquisitions?
So the first question about the true cash value. So the assessor's office estimates based on current market conditions, what is the true cash value that this could go on the market for? And they're estimating it's worth about $1.5 million. The city bought it for $599,000. So in full transparency, we got a really good deal based on what the assessor's office has it valued at. It should be noted when we purchased it as well, we gave the bank the parking lot that's across the street just to the south. So it was a bit of a complicated transaction in addition to the $599,000. So the purchase price, the offer are based on what the city paid for it minus the parking lot, I believe is how those numbers kind of got formulated in estimates, and also what city council considered in the first agreement that was approved by city council in June. So I think that was sort of the basis and the starting point for a roundabout number that city council may consider. W&R Acquisitions LLC is an LLC. I know they're associated with Weens and Roth Realty, and it's Weens and Roth that would be intent on opening a real estate office in Monroe in part of the facility, just part of the facility, and then they would work with the city, and I'm speaking out of the proposal here, work with the city to identify another beneficial business to occupy the remainder of the building.
So, again, I'm not really versed in this, but are we losing money then? Or we're not losing money because you're considering the cost of the parking lot, which we do not own?
Yeah, we own it all right now. It's our intent to parcel off and separate out that parking area that's in between the building itself and the Register of Deeds where the buses are parked right now. So we would keep that. So we would retain the value of that parking lot, and it would be the intent to keep it as a public parking lot. And so whether we're losing money, we paid $599,000. The value of the parking lot we had estimated to be about $300,000, and so leaving about $299,000 for the city to recoup to sell the building. However, that's far less than what the building is worth, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And could we sell this building outright for market value to a business or private owner?
Yeah, that's a conversation the city manager and I had recently about, what are some options to convey this building? Because it's not the city's intent to hang on to any of these properties long term. We want to see them back on the tax rolls. We want to see them reactivated for the community benefit. And so when you list a building with a realtor, you're inviting anybody to bring you an offer, right? So whether we list it and ask, 1.5 million, anybody could bring us an offer, of whatever it may be, and it would be our duty to bring that to you. With an RFP that the city manager is recommending that we cast out far and wide, it gives the city to identify what exactly we want in that building and what we want that building to be used for. And we send it out and see if any developers or investors or business owners are interested in fulfilling the city's vision. So it's a little bit like what we did with the Lazy Boy site, where we developed the sub-area plan and said, this is what we want. We want commercial, residential. Developers came to us and said, we'll help build your vision. And that's how we came to the agreement with Squire Properties. So that would be what the recommendation that we're bringing forward here is to develop an RFP. Communities do this all the time. Right now, I saw the city of Tecumseh recently released one last week. I sent it to Matt Vanasacker and Amy Zarand for the mill property that's on M50 going into Tecumseh. They put out a comprehensive package and said, this is what we want to see happen with that property. Bring us your ideas and your offers. So there's a bit of a difference between just listing it and saying, anybody bring us an offer and here's what we want for it, versus a more defined vision.
So we keep a little bit more control over what type of business we want to see in that area.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Councilman Lamore.
The west side parking lot, can that be partitioned away from the rest of the property?
In terms of a separate parcel?
Yes.
Create a separate parcel. This is not zoned central business district. In the central business district, there's no parking requirements that are associated with properties. This is zoned MU1, I believe it is, and there are parking requirements. So
Has to be part of it.
we would have to make sure that if that were considered or offered or explored, that they would still be able to meet their parking requirements for the use in the zoning district.
And I would say currently, the biggest hangup with the building right now is the taxes, roughly $50,000 a year.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's some of the feedback we've received.
Okay.
Which of course are set by the assessor's office based various conditions, and for us we can't unilaterally set the taxes ourselves or lower the taxes or guarantee the taxes. Those are all set by a variety of factors that the assessor's office uses, from market conditions, comparable sales, square footage, things of that sort.
That can also be the reason why we got the building so cheap as well, though, because they were willing to give rid of the building because it was so expensive tax-wise. They cut their losses early and then basically gave it to us for a better price because of that.
Yeah, there were, I think a lot went into that discussion about the property sale, and it was really the city's interest, and they didn't have another buyer at the time. So whether that was the bank's thinking, I'm not sure. Obviously, they fared okay too, because they still got a parking lot that they needed for their employees, and we got what we wanted. So
Do you know if they publicly put out some kind of RFP to see if anybody was interested in the building when
The
they owned
bank?
it? Yes.
No, I think they multiple properties that they had vacated at the time, they just listed them with a realtor.
Thank you. That's all I have to ask.
Councilwoman Germain?
So if we put out a broader RFP, is there a time limit on that? How long does that take?
Yeah, typically you ask for responses within a certain period. So much like we do with all of our RFPs when we're doing a purchase, we put it out there. We invite people to submit proposals. We'll do a pre-bid conference, to answer questions and meet with potential buyers and investors and developers. And then if there's questions that need answered, we can put out an addendum, get the responses back, and then RFPs would be due. We would probably do a sealed bid, just like we did with this process, where they're returned to the city clerk's office sealed and then opened at a certain time and then reviewed and brought back to city council.
We broaden the RFP and see what happens and see the chips where they fall.
Yeah, and I'd say with that process, it wouldn't just be those who receive it who can submit a proposal. We would open it to the public, so anybody at that point could also submit a proposal, not just the ones that we invite to bid. We would probably post it on many different websites and organizations throughout the state as well to cast the net wider.
Councilman Vining?
So you said it's not in the central business district. Is it in this upcoming planned unit development area?
No.
over on Scott Street?
No,
So,
it's the next block.
so did we identify what type of businesses, do we have any plans out there? I know we're gonna be getting some analysis coming up here soon of what we wanna see in that particular area.
Yeah, we've done several different market analysis for the downtown to look at what are gaps that we need. Matt Van Nissacker is obviously working on residential for a strategy for that, but we've also done in the past various market studies and market analysis that tell us where gaps are in our community, where people are leaving the city to go shop and to go eat and dine. And so we would look at that data to inform us as we put together the RFP to say, this is what we feel our city needs and our city wants and our city can support and what our residents and visitors are looking for. Let us know what you want to do using our property.
And some of those things you talked about, like the specialty stores, the restaurants and things, do those fit into that zoning?
They do. When we updated the zoning code back in 2020, we updated it to allow a lot of those uses that were identified as gaps. And while, for clarification, while this may not be in the central business district zoning district, it is within the DDA district. So it is under the Downtown Development Authority in their TIF district.
So I guess I have a couple items that just for review, because as Mark has stated, when we started this process with acquiring the property, including the parking, it was tied to at least one or two other options that council had discussed as how we develop, I'll call it the governmental complex, the city and the county. And the county is currently using the property to the south for parking, which is of course what we wanted to happen, because it does tie to the conversation of the former fire station at Scott and First Street and the developer that who we're in conversation with about the development, I should say, of that process or property. And then behind it is a vacant lot that the county owns, and how we're trying to tie that together, both for in a collective nature of commercial and residential development. And that's kind of the buffer and the idea between the residential neighborhood and the downtown development neighborhood, and how that type of housing kind of fills the gap between the two. So that's kind of how we got here on that. There's other components to it as well, the city parking lot and that really about managing. The other part on the property that we did transfer over when we received this was the lot that's on South Macomb on the west side, but that we also have first right of refusal to retain it back if it's not used. So it's making some strategic positioning of properties. So that gets us to this property, and the purchase, but then also the valuation and the separation. There's been discussion with other entities interested, and it just didn't come to fruition. So now I'm going to kind of look at both of the proposals. The first one, I know that there's many here from the River Raisin Center for the Arts. I don't know if there's any representatives here from the Weens Acquisition LLC. So I went through the proposal, and I think if you're looking to make a purchase and an agreement in fact of what that might look like, I was hoping to see more in relation to that. I can see the numbers and I can see the proposal and the timeframes, but one thing that's in there, they did talk about the environmental monitoring of the noxious concrete slab gases that was determined through the evaluation. Didn't require further environmental, but it does require some action. I was looking, now I'll shift to the other one. In that item particularly, I see on the one page which says due diligence contingency, and the one box checked is purchaser satisfaction with the results of environmental site assessment. What does that exactly mean? And is it the same of what was written over here about the responsibility on the environmental monitoring? Is that part of is that in here that maybe I didn't read or just not read in the right location?
No, so when it comes to the environmental monitoring, that's a recommended action for the current owner as due diligence. So in regard to the RRCA, if they became the owner of the building, that would be up to their, their decision making whether they want to continue with that recommended monitoring as part of their due diligence. Certainly, obviously, all of our documents are public. We know what we know as a result of our environmental due diligence. They would have the option to do their own environmental due diligence. I noted in the proposal from the RRCA, it says who pays for that is to be determined. Related to the WNR acquisition or WNR proposal, the city would remain as the owner of that property. And so it would be incumbent upon us to follow our own due diligence for that for the quarterly monitoring. I'll say the monitoring is about around $14,000 to $18,000. So this entity would propose to contribute $1,500 toward that.
So as I look at this, and I'll go back to that proposal here, it's looking to, read this correct, enter into a lease agreement as states below, $5,000 non-refundable option to service the rent. And then the proposed term is 12 years with a 1-year option, which then could be another year to do the same. And it does say at any time could be purchased for $275,000, but looking out, it could be at least 2 years permissible, and they could not purchase at all and ask for extensions or just walk, correct?
Yeah.
So it's not really, it's a proposal, but I think it doesn't give end solutions at this time for the council to consider. So that part concerns me because we could be here 2 years later or so doing the exact same thing. So that's one part I have. On the other proposal, it's a far less amount, but there's as was stated, the property on Cass Street. And as I read through the materials, they currently have lease space with at the Benish building, but I know that they're moving away from there. So that's one of the reasons they're looking for space, but they've needed space in the past. I think that's well known. And I don't know that the 114 Cass is meeting all their needs. But as this transition goes through and it kind of goes to the manager's comment, then we have to look at it as a council. This is my view. I'm sharing with council and others, and they have their own, and the public as well. As the value that's being offered is much lesser than what the property is valued. But then 114 Cass. But we don't really then get into the comment was made about taxable properties. It'd be taxable in one sense and not taxable in the other. And of course, when we own it, it's not taxable either. So now it hasn't changed anything as far as, just ownership of the Cass building doesn't change it from a improvement to a taxable location for unless of course it was sold and becomes for a different use. But then that, if I understand this correctly, that, the ownership comes to the city, then it's our diligence to then go out and find somebody for it. Whereas currently, if they wanted to divest of the property in Cass Street, it would be theirs to find a buyer. So it just shifts that diligence and work to the city then. So I think it really comes down to, we all recognize the River Raisin Center for the Arts for their legacy here, and we just honored somebody else for their work in the arts, and recognize that they are an important part of our community, our downtown. They have some space needs, and we have some space available, but I think it's got to be closer than where it currently is in the offer. I think about this conversation here today, and it's a decision-making item. We could have had conversation from all council had we got this. I understand proposals came in, so the decision was to bring it to council for an action item for consideration. And I think the opportunity for all to have discussion at a work session would have been different than deliberating into a decision making. So I think there's space for that to be done. I think both for council and for all the council, because then we have maybe some, this is helpful for information. It does, neither proposal gets me there to take action at this time. I think that besides putting it out for RFP for more people, I think that's part of it, but I'd like to have the opportunity to really, look at the where we are currently within some of the proposals we have that are associated with this property, both for use with the county, some other discussions we had with the county, not just the plaza item that was here tonight, but I think, we've talked about the how do we consolidate and improve the governmental complex parking so we can use it at the best possible sense. And it doesn't matter if it's the city, county, or somebody else that's governmental if they're using it, and then still have opportunity for parking for the public. Or, of course, I know at the courthouse it's always about people coming for jury duty and those things. And they have other lots that they provide that for that services. So I really like to have some discussion before a decision. That's where I'm at. I'm not prepared at this point to make a decision. I think that there's no question because of the RRCA and the support it gets from members that are here and from the community, and I understand their need for space. But we also have to then look at that in the sense of, at least I think, of what is the value of the property and how do we make this work better for both. So that's my comment at first. Mr. Robbins, do you have a comment? And then I'll see if there's other comments from council.
Well, it's pretty obvious tonight that there is a lot to consider when we're doing this, especially when you're looking at an offer from the River Raisin Performing Arts, because it is such value in our community. And if the council is not prepared to make an action tonight, I would recommend that I pull the item from the action and we set it up for a work session, which would allow the council time to study the information that has already been provided, and we can address it at the next work study session and have more conversation about this and be able to answer more questions. My only concern with that is, was there a time limit on the offer from both the entities that prohibits us from making it to the next work session for the council meeting?
I know for the offer from the RRCA, there was a clause in there that we would close by October 16th, 2023. But if we bring it up at a future work session, I think we've still got some time before that date. But
So I have a follow-up recommendation if we're going to go this route. I know that there's many representatives from the River Raisin Center for the Arts that are here. I would like to ensure that whether it be the hold on a second, either the executive director or those that signed the agreement, that they have the opportunity to come speak with us as well. I'd like to hear some more from that perspective. I know I have the information from me and I can read it, and I know that some of the needs were there, but I would be looking for everybody's always welcome at the meetings. Don't take me wrong that way. But from Christy Lindsay or Mike Trapp, if they're here, they might give us some other perspective that I just don't have. Again, I think we're fully aware of what their needs are in space, what services they provide to not just youth, but adults and the program that they have. But we also have to consider in relation to the monetary amount that we have in the properties the city has acquired for strategic reasons, but also for the return, so we can continue to move forward. And I think of our Telegraph Road Corridor Improvement Authority and what we're doing in that sense. It's very similar of that acquisition for the planned and betterment. And then maybe in part of that is sending out a broader perspective, and we find out that there is no other interest. Then we have more to work with before we make a decision. So if this, and I look at the council, look at the manager, what he might be recommending, at least for this evening, is if we do that, we make sure that there's an invite, because I'd like to hear more from that perspective as well. I'm just not certain on the first proposal. I know that they have offices, as you read the information, they have offices that are in Toledo and South County. I think it says in Bedford. And I think they say what they bring needed services, establish restaurants, but in incubator space. But I just think there's got to be more information than what was presented for me to support that recommendation. And the timeline before it can be purchased, to me, is I don't want to be here 2 or 3 years later and find out we're still starting all over again. I think it's got to be definite. At least one proposal was definite. We knew the timeline, we knew the amount, and you can make a decision. You're an informed decision maker. The other is, well, we'll see if this changes in 2 years. So I'd like to see something that's a little more concrete in that relation, whether it be from Ween's acquisition or some other company. That's kind of where I am. I'll just leave it to see if there's other comments from council members. Councilman Lamore?
Thank you, Your Honor. A lot of decisions from municipalities have to be based on not necessarily what you're receiving back from the person that's getting the benefit of this, but how is it benefiting the rest of the community? I certainly would like to see a little bit more closer to a better valuation, but we certainly have spent our money on other things within this community that have not given us the benefit back that we've put the money out for. So I don't necessarily think it's an overwhelming proposal, but we have to keep in mind also that what we're trying to do here is to also allow for another member of our community to grow and get bigger, more or less, and serve our community in that respect, which they do a great job of right now. And I'm talking about the RRCA, obviously. And the other question I had was regarding the Ween's offered. What were the taxes going to be on that? Did I mishear that? What were we going to do with those?
Yeah, so with that, the city would be responsible for the taxes until they, during their lease or until they execute the option to purchase.
Okay.
Right now, because the city owns it, the value, there is no taxes assessed on the property. That would be reevaluated on December 31st of this year. But so right now the taxes are zero until it becomes a usable space and somebody's in it.
I think this is definitely worth further discussion, without a doubt. Because it doesn't seem like there are too many favorable people here right now to accept either proposal. And I would definitely like to consider something moving forward and rearrange it somehow, or whatever we have to do. Just find something that's going to work for both the city and whichever firm comes forward with a benefit to the city. And that's what we have to look for. It's more for the benefit to the city than it is to and the community than it is to the actual price tag.
So, Mr. Robinson, I think your comment previously was at this time to have the item pulled from the agenda, but I'm looking for Mr. Buds for, I guess, what the options are. I know you can postpone, you can table, but they all have timelines associated to it. And if we don't know the timeline, I don't want to be where we're coming back just to say we're going to wait again another meeting, because that's not favorable to everybody's time. So I'm trying to look to what might be the appropriate motion from what's been heard, so we at least get on the right path with this discussion.
Your Honor, so tabling the item would mean that it would need to be brought back up off the table at the next meeting, or it would die for lack of support. Therefore, I think in this circumstance, my recommendation that it be postponed until some further action or until after an event has occurred are the two common ways that that's done. If it's inclined to be back as a work session item, I think it would be fine to postpone consideration until after the matter has been discussed at a work session. The only thing that then needs to happen is it needs to get on a work session agenda and then taken up at the next regular meeting. I will say that's a little bit of a complicated procedural motion, but I think we could work through that if that's the will of council. And I would also obviously defer to the city manager as far as time availability on the upcoming agenda, whether that would be at the next meeting or I would say my recommendation is if we can fit it in, that happen at the next work session so that then we have a path forward for everyone that's involved.
So if I heard you correctly, if the council decides to, table is just, I think, not the proper, but that's me, the postpone until the next council meeting or council work session for discussion until, correct? Because it can't deliberate, you can't make decisions at a work session. The idea is to have more conversation about what was said tonight or other things that we may have in preparation for that. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the clarification that I might make is if we're going to postpone the consideration on the motion or consideration on the action item, giving some specificity as to when that will come back before council would be helpful for agenda and planning purposes. So if it's going to be a work session item at the next meeting, I think that's fine. I think the question becomes, should it be up for action then at the next council meeting that would follow that work session, or would it potentially be another 2 weeks after that? And I would say that's where I would need the will of council for what their desire is.
Well, I'll wait and see if there's a motion from council then, that's probably what was stated. I see somebody writing and I see others thinking, so.
Well, if we, Your Honor,
Councilwoman Vining.
if we postpone the meeting and we say, because we want to have a discussion at the work session, and then we find out at the work session we still not ready, can we just say then that we need to postpone this further?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just waiting to see if there's a motion. And I think there will be, and any ideas that we move forward with answering some of the questions, but also having conversations, so. Councilman Lamore looks like he wants to give it a go.
I'll give it a whirl, see how this works here. I'd like to make a motion to postpone council action item number 4218 until further discussion is had at the next work session, which is September 18th. Thank you, 2023. I'll defer to attorneys.
Okay, Mr. Buds, and
Better
there's a motion, and there's a second coming,
I
so.
think I understand, but I want to make sure and maybe offer a suggestion as to wording on that it be to have the matter considered and presented at the next work session on September 18th, and that the formal action be postponed until the regular city council meeting on September 18th at 7:30.
That sounds tremendous.
Councilman Germain, okay, there's a motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Germaini regarding item 4218, review and recommendation of proposal for the 212 East Front Street property. Look, before I take the roll, clerk, is you have the information you need
I have the information I need for the vote, and I'm sure
for the
Mr.
motion?
Buds will help make sure we have
Okay.
it clean in the minutes.
Any questions from the council further?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I would also like to ask that both parties attend the next work session if they want to offer their sentiment. I think that'd be something possibly, I don't know if that'd be anything to
Not
do
in
with
the
the
motion,
motion.
it's not in the
but
motion, but
just an
it's a
invitation
comment
to
to be
come.
made after we take the roll. Yeah, I agree. Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining? Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Abstain.
Whitman?
Yes.
Steelgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes, so I know both the proposals that were submitted, there's representation here. I ask that you please attend the work session if possible, or send a representative that may want to share some of your information. I know that Mr. Trapp and I just spoke briefly before the meeting. He said if there's any questions, so he was here for questions, but I think we'll save those for that. Obviously, anybody's welcome to stay as we get through the council comments and public comment at the end. If anybody wishes to make a comment then, please stay, and you have an opportunity to address the council if you wish at that time as well. And we'll talk about that that time in 3 minutes and stuff like that. So, clerk, next item, please.
I have no further items this evening, Your Honor.
So tonight is there's council comments. Mr. Robinson, is there any? I know you sent out a correspondence earlier. Is there any comments? If not, we'll start with the council comments.
There is actually. I'd just like to, obviously, we're all well aware of the tragic incident that happened with 2 people being shot, one fatally on Saturday during a robbery and a carjacking, etc. And I think it's really important. We were lucky, and by the good work of our law enforcement and our public safety, the fire department, and all of our partners, that the director of public safety leveraged both state, local, federal, the county, Ohio State Police, Wood County Sheriff's Department. All of those partnerships don't happen by accident. And I think that they did a wonderful job. But that was just the very beginning stages of a very serious and very intense criminal investigation. And I know that there is comment, Terry, that is speculative. Some of it is inaccurate, and it's premature that's taking place in the public commentary locations. And I would just like to remind everyone, my staff, I would make a recommendation to the council that we really wait until we are briefed with actual factual information from our Director of Public Safety before we make commentary on any of these items. There is an integrity of the criminal investigation that is at stake. It's very serious, and I want the professionals that are doing those investigations to have the latitude, the support, and the ability, because it's not just us. There's investigations also going on in the state of Ohio based on the crimes they committed there during this process. And it's important that without the investigators being tugged because of public commentary or making statements until they're ready to make a statement, until all of the facts have been vetted, I think it's inappropriate to make commentary on something that has not been vetted for factuality. Now, granted, from the city, my deepest condolences would go out to the families of all of the victims of the crimes that occurred here, the robbery victims as well as the shooting victims, and our prayers are out for them. And the loss of human life is always tragic, no matter what the circumstance. And obviously, from all of my staff and everybody at our city, our condolences go out to the families of those victims. But other than that, I'm going to reserve commentary on the rest of that. And that's why I wanted to speak it first, because I just wanted to make sure that we all recognize the importance is the truth and the integrity of the investigation. And we don't want to give out information that is not factual or been vetted as true, because that can create hysteria, can create fear, or it's unwarranted. And I think it's just very important that you let the facts be found before commenting. That's it.
Okay, council comments. It is September, so as we rotate each month, Councilwoman Vining.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Um, I want to thank the city departments for their quick response to all of the flooding. That was a mess. Thank you, Water Department, DPS, and everybody. I saw you guys out there. Thanks, Patrick, for getting the street sweepers out there. We were fussing a little bit because it was slow moving, but we understood why. So thanks for your quick action. We hadn't really seen flooding like that since we installed the pumps, but I understand it was a 200-year rain event, and it was scary, but it was good to see the city jump into action like that. Also, following up on the Mr. City Manager's comments, I agree, of course, we wouldn't want to speak on a criminal investigation that is still in progress. So I'm going to speak socially and personally. First, I'd like to offer my condolences to the Russo Beck family on the loss of a wonderful young man who grew up in the area. He's one of what I like to call my library kids. So I've known him most of his life, and it's a great loss for the community. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this socially, I don't know much about the criminal investigation or whatnot, but what I do know, the Orchard East, we talk about it a lot here because we're in the process of revitalization, redevelopment. Some people might say gentrification, but however you choose to look at it, one thing we do know about the Orchard East is that it's, I would say, the most diverse neighborhood in our community in terms of different races, ethnicities, um, socioeconomic levels. Uh, Everybody is kind of all together there. Everybody knows everybody. We we get a bad rap, and that's historical. And I can say that because I've researched it. The East Side has always been harshly judged, and I'll say these are my opinions. Somewhat used as a dumping ground of sorts, where whatever you might need in terms of social services, uh, a lot of people are directed to the Orchard East neighborhood to look for those things. And so, as of late, in the last few years or whatever, we've this neighborhood where we know everybody knows whose grandmother this is, who's your mom, who's your dad. All of a sudden, we've begun to see uh, people that we don't know, because they're seeking housing or other things. I've been complaining for some time now about the Labor Park. It was really sad this year that the city had about, I want to say, 12, maybe less, 8 tot lot locations, and Labor Park was the only one where our children weren't really able to sit under the gazebo of the beautiful $1.6 million park that we invested in, because of adults and mostly adults sitting out there where we wouldn't want the kids to be exposed to some of the behaviors, the music, the language, um, uh, the alleged drug and alcohol use. And I'll say alleged, but I've witnessed it with my own eyes. But so we had Meet Up and Eat Up, is Sodexo. They service Monroe Public Schools, but they do a wonderful summer feeding program. Our young ladies had to sit on the grass under the trees. Um, they weren't able to serve food at the park like all of the other meet up and greet ups because of the things I just mentioned. Now I know I've complained about it. I know representatives from MCOP have complained about it, and I'm sure others that I'm not aware have complained about it. And I know it's a catch-22 because it's a public park, and you can't, it's a thin line of pushing people out of a public park. But, you know, that's a beautiful park, and I've met people from all over who bring their children there, but they are concerned, and it just got really bad with people publicly urinating in the park and different things like that. And so socially, you know, I can't say what would happen or whatever, but I don't know. I don't have the answers as to what can be done, but I know that um, something needs to be done. Um, that we have a lot of agencies in the area who are tasked and their missions are to address a lot of these issues, such as substance abuse, mental health, homelessness, and other things. And I think they need to not only send the people to say you can find help here on the east side, you can go here, you can go there, but also maybe consider sending the resources as well. And maybe in the future, we can avoid tragedies like this one. It could have been any of us. I go to that store all the time because I feel a bit more comfortable going there as opposed to Town Square where there's usually larger crowds. So I run in S&S, as we call it in the neighborhood, all the time. Am I over my 3 minutes, Your Honor? Yeah, I am. Okay. Yeah, I see
We don't
moving
have
around over there.
time for the council, but
Oh, okay.
go ahead.
So please bear with me. This is a very tragic event. It's very personal to me and the members of my precinct. And we're all talking about it, but I'm the representative, so I'm here to take enough time to express our rage and uh, feelings of neglect. And I don't really have fingers to point directly at individuals, but you know, I don't think that I could go lay in St. Mary's Park in the middle of the sidewalk. I think it'd be less than 5 minutes before the police would be there. But I watched a man lay in the middle of the sidewalk on 3rd Street. I know over an hour. The poor little kids, they just stepped over him and just keep going about their business. And the issue is that when there's a lot of trauma and you constantly live around where you see people drunk, high, and other things, I think sometimes you get numb. And it's saddening to see our kids watch somebody lay passed out in the park and they just jump over them and keep playing. Why? Because they're so used to seeing this. And I know a lot of kids would never have to deal with that. And I don't know who to ask because I've been talking about this stuff for 20 years, but um, I would say, believe us when we say that there's issues and they are more prevalent in that area than they are in other parts of the city. And maybe they're not more prevalent, but maybe they're just allowed to exist more. So, again, I just, in closing, want to offer my condolences to all the victims, the store owners, and everyone who had to suffer that horrible tragedy. And hope that we can come together as a city and as the agencies who are tasked with addressing these issues and try to see if we can improve on these things. We still have a lot of investments planned in the area, and I get nervous every time something crazy happens because I'm like, wow, is this gonna derail our plans to build this neighborhood and this community? And yeah, and then just worrying for the safety and of the children and the residents of the area. So, I think the police and the fire and the EMS did a wonderful job in responding, and I hope that they're able to convict these people to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilwoman Germaine.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to say how proud I am of all of our public safety departments here in Monroe. The past weekend was a tough one, not just with the carjacking. We had some other incidents that happened as well, and they handled it accordingly, and I'm proud of all of them. On a lighter note, the end of summer bash at the ALCC was a huge success, probably over 500 people. It was endless children, and everybody had a blast. And then I want to thank Jeff Ott. He went on his own and he donated a bunch of back-to-school supplies and backpacks to the Greenwood community, and that happened last Wednesday. And I wanted to thank him for that. That's all, Your Honor.
Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. Congrats to the Monroe Community Players on their 75 years. That's probably the biggest bright spot tonight as far as announcing anything. Thank you to all the city departments on their response to the two storms we had 2 weeks ago. I think they did an excellent job. Residents helped themselves in some cases, helping the Stevens Disposal help them take some of their trash and put it in their trucks. So thank you for being a part of that, residents, and helping yourselves do those things. As far as our tragedy this past weekend, our police officers do a great job, and they reflected that this past weekend. Yes, they get paid to do their job, but they're also the ones that have to be there at the scene. They have to decipher what happened. They have to help the people that have had the tragedy put upon them. So I'm glad that we have our chaplains in the police department to help those people, not only those people, but also our firemen and the other people that are in need to possibly cope with some of that tragedy. But great job on their part for the response that they gave. And it's refreshing to know that in anywhere in the city of Monroe, that they're going to be there with a quick response. And I don't know if the rest of the county can say that, but this city has a very quick response when it comes to our public safety, and I'm very thankful for that, and that's why I'm glad to live in the city of Monroe. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, it's certainly terrible to see some of the senseless events that happened recently. And I wish the Public Safety Department the best of luck in proceeding with their ongoing investigation, but I'll leave that at that. Today was the first day of school for most kids heading back right now. And I know that we had Labor Day over the weekend as well. We had a Labor Day parade and festival over the downtown with a lot of food trucks, free festivities, and there was a craft table. There was live entertainment all day. I know this is the first event they've had of this since the pandemic, and so I look forward to seeing this grow over time as it continues, hopefully. So, congratulations as well to the Monroe Community Players on 75 years. That truly is an enormous achievement. It's wonderful to see what a group of dedicated volunteers can do within the community, and it's great that we have a variety of live community theater to see there and other places throughout the community. And with their celebration coming up, and with our discussion regarding the public art ordinance or policy, for whatever it ends up being, I think that there's a wider discussion to have in the community regarding arts and the importance that it plays in our economic growth and development, in terms of quality of life and why people choose to live here, in terms of vibrancy in the downtown and economic development and growth. I think that we need to recognize the importance of partnering with these local organizations like Monroe Community Players, like the Robert Seldon Duncanson Society, and of course others, to provide these artistic, cultural, and enrichment opportunities throughout our community. Because I think that harnessing those assets is going to be one of the ways that we move forward in a very positive and meaningful way. So that's all I have for this evening, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Whitman.
Yes, there's not too much left for me to comment on. You know, I pretty much feel the same way that everyone else does. The storm, the water, what a lot of my neighbors had to go through, I'm so grateful that I still had power. I didn't get water in my basement. I mean, and then the tragedy this weekend, it's made me think a lot about my community and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's the way that it is. But my heart goes out to the families that have suffered. And it's made me count my blessings. And I love living in Monroe. And I'm very proud of the public safety and the fire department and the jobs that they do. So that's about all that I have. I'm just feeling grateful today.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stilgrave.
I just want to offer my condolences to the Beck family and prayers and that for the other young man that was shot. And as senseless as it is, I mean, our departments really stuck together and they did a fantastic job, and we should be very proud of them. And we had some other events going on this past weekend, and I hope everybody was able to get out there and enjoy them. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. So I'll follow up along with the council's comments here. And myself, but also the council, the community, and our condolences to the family of a loss of a son, a brother, a cousin, and a father in a senseless shooting. Obviously, from the robbery to the carjacking, and when a time when, as I understand that there's, they were not being combative. They were, take my car, but the senseless shooting occurs. The motivation and why, I think, is still need to be determined. I don't think it can be tied to anything particular that we have within our community, from one end of our community to the other. There's this senseless violence that occurs at the moment, and I just think that our thoughts are in the investigation, the public safety, and the work that they're doing and continue to do. But also, again, condolences to the family. But then also, as was stated by Councilwoman Stilgrave, the second victim, which struggles to survive, and that's going to be difficult. So, other part of this, I want to thank the residents of the Orchard East community. When the incident occurred and the public safety responded, I'll just say their participation and support, not investigating, not going after somebody, but just the basic information of how important that is at a crime scene such as that, and how it gets followed up on. The critical information that led to the arrests in Ohio, and the partnerships that our public safety and police department have with other agencies, both local and state, federal, both in Michigan and Ohio, made the difference of why there was a quick apprehension. But there were residents, and there was others that observed part of it. And I'm very pleased to know that as they got conversations, that they provided what they had without compromising themselves as well. And that's important when you talk about community and the role of the community and how we work together. So I think that it's a tragic, but there's no way that we have good in our community. I don't know the cause. I don't know what the underlying items are, because that's not been determined yet. I think that tying it to something that's this tragic event to other things at this point is premature. I think it'll have to be vetted out. I appreciate the Councilwoman Viney's comments. I think as we have all of our communities, we have the same response for all of our communities, and we should have. I think that, you know, if there's issues, concerns at a park, there's ways in which we can manage that. It is a public park, and she is correct. Public parks allow people to use the public park. It's there both for kids and other people. But if there's things that are in violation of ordinance, then we also need to support to know that. Whether there's, you know, urination or drugs or other things, the police can respond. But so I ask that the residents, I thank them for their support. I thank them for their participation without compromising themselves, and how we can move forward past this tragedy for future as we continue to grow together. And that really goes for all of our communities across, and all of our parks across the city. You know, the flooding, I know was talked about a lot. One of the things I want to thank the staff for, besides the response, and we know that a lot of people were negatively impacted by that. I think Councilwoman said, you know, a 200-year storm. You don't expect that in a short 7-hour time frame, but it occurred. But the response and the calls, we appreciate coming in. The staff immediately got with Stevens Disposal, set up special pickup dates. And when that those 2 days went by, you know, get calls like, well, they're going to have to wait here till the next one because we posted that, which was 10 days later. No, the answer is no. They came back out the next day and continued that pickup. But I encourage residents that are still struggling with the cleanup of that there's a way to call and get special pickups. Please make sure we make the appropriate calls and try to make it scheduled so we can finish that cleanup. And I know there are some neighborhoods that were more impacted than others. That doesn't mean we're not all concerned about everybody that's in our community, how they get impacted by the flooding. So those are my comments for this evening. Again, I just think as a community, we need to continue to stand together and be strong. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy.
Given the nature of what the tragedy this weekend, and I too echo all of the thoughts of council, I'll defer this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Robinson.
Well, I'm not going to really touch upon the comments I made previously in regards to the shooting incident on Saturday, other than the fact that I'm very proud that our public safety department, both police and fire, they operated as they should. They did an excellent job, and I'm very proud of them. But a lot has happened since we were here the last time. The other thing that happens, we had a 200-year storm, and 5.2 inches of rain fell in 6 hours. Now, you can hear those stats, and it's wonderful. You're like, oh yeah, 5.2. Let's to put it into perspective, and I know I let council members know this, but I think it's important for the public to hear and the public that are watching. When the most recent Category 3 Hurricane Idalia hit, where it went landfall in Florida, dropped 4 to 8 inches of rain over a 12-hour period. That's from a Category 3 hurricane. Now, granted, we didn't have storm surges and we didn't have the other things that are accumulating with the hurricane. But from rainfall event as its own, 5.2 inches of rain in 6 hours, to me, is a heck of a lot more rain, and it's like simple math. It's a lot more rain than what they received, and ours was in a shorter period of time. And I think the fact that, I know when I got called by Director Lavoy at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he said, we're at maximum capacity and actually exceeding maximum capacity from our water handling systems. And they actually functioned above where they were rated. I think the fact that all of our staff, every single one of our staff, when it came from the people answering the phones from the residents, from the DPS people out picking up brush, from the water treatment people delivering special pumps to DTE because they were an hour and a half away from having to actually shut the plant due to the flooding, and then power would have been out in all of pretty much southeast Michigan. I couldn't be prouder of an entire staff because it was a true team effort. from the directors who came in and organized everything that needed to be done and put it together, put out the public information, did all this stuff. It was just an absolute phenomenal job, and I'm very proud of them. But I think it's very important to understand, and I believe me, I've talked to many residents about the rainfall and what's in their basements, and we immediately got a hold of the emergency management people in the county, and we did provide resources for people to be able to give the assessment, because the higher the assessment number, the more likelihood that our county may be receiving money from either the state or the federal system for emergency management in order to be able to assist with some of the recovery. But I appreciate our public has been very responsive. They've listened. They've tuned into our website. They've done the things we've asked. And it's been a lot, but I think we've had 2 major events that tested every single person that works in the city. And I think that we should all be very proud of those individuals because they all performed to optimally considering the circumstances we faced. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is for citizens' comments. They have an item that I added to my list I wanted. It's on a much lighter note, and things of coming in the future. But on Saturday, September 16th, the Downtown Monroe Business Network is having the Michigan Craft Beer Fest that they host annually. So that's on the DMBN's webpage, I'm certain. Opportunities for tickets, and have a community event downtown on September 16th. So at this time, next on the agenda is citizens' comments. So before I get started, just be mindful of the rules of the chamber. If you have comments, 3 minutes, please, and address the podium here. So I'll take citizens' comments for those that are present. Yes, sir. And I ask you, please state your name so we have it for the record, but also your jurisdiction or residence.
Elliot James, 633 Stone Street. I came in here with my chest full, and y'all took all the air out of it. On the comments about the tragedy on the East End, the only thing I had left to say that this was not East End people that done the shooting. These were people that brought in, that the ones that be laying on the sidewalks, and we don't have anything to help them. We don't have anybody to help them. Well, the people that we have to help them, they're not funded. So they don't know what to do or how to do it. And that's how you develop the criminals in the first place. Stop that, you'll stop the rest of it. Plus, it rained very hard a few minutes ago, and I got a call saying that you got water in the streets again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Other comments from those present here this evening? Yes, sir. Just your name, please, and jurisdiction or residence.
All righty. My name is Jonathan R. Cook, 302 Lavender Street. Born and immersed in Monroe Hospital, Jefferson K through 12, United States Air Force, honorable discharge, former Monroe County Commissioner. Now, I came here tonight to address a personal issue, which is 302 Lavender on the agenda where I live. Now, it was skipped over and not commented on by council whatsoever. That's fine. I also want to comment on Mason Run because I own 1.8 acres of the Mason Run development area. And I'm glad to see that this is on here, which I didn't know, and this is happening. Fantastic. Because the PUD has held any development back over there. And as a property owner over there, I'm glad and thank you. And then also, I volunteer and serve my country, my community, and the arts. And I am in total support of the RRCA getting 212, which I didn't know about either, versus another commercial interest, especially a real estate office, with 2 or 3 people occupying a corner for free. there is no way to quantify the value added to the community by what the RRC does. Just no way to quantify it. Can you? Any of you quantify the value that they bring to the lives of the children and the adults? No, we can't. So in my opinion, a real estate office with a couple people in the corner getting free rent? Nah. RRCA. I also would like an opportunity to address the blight issue of 302 Lavender Street, which is really a dirt hill about this high that I got for free from a buddy to do some backfilling in my yard. The weeds got high, and I need a reprieve, Mr. Buds, so I can address that and knock the hill down and get the weeds off of it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. So just for clarity, we didn't pass an item. It's for discussion. It's okay. It was under the consent agenda, and we asked the council if there's item before. We asked everybody here if they wish to pull an item. Maybe it's more a procedural process thing and maybe better clarification. Yourself or anybody here can pull any item on the consent agenda for discussion so that we don't pass things as much as the consent agenda gets passed collectively and the council actions has the discussion deliberation that was occurred there. But if you want to, if you have a concern regarding the blight, you need to see the city manager at the end, and he'll be able to have a conversation with you about how that might get rectified without the further blight issues.
Understood, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've received the letter from his office on Friday
Okay.
to attend the meeting today. So I feel there was something not right about that. I should have gotten that letter much sooner than the Friday before a holiday weekend of a meeting happening on the Tuesday after the holiday, right? So if I did have to prepare for that or see counsel myself, I had no time
Okay.
whatsoever.
If you have further, you'd like to see Mr. Robinson and
I will.
have a conversation.
And I understand how consent agendas work and how they get voted on and how it just goes. I get it. That's fine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other comments from those present here this evening? Seeing no other comments.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion from Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Jermaine? Yes. Lamore?
Yes.
Felder? Whitman? Yes. Stillgrave? Yes. Mayor Clark?
Yes.